Okay. All right, welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday, October 18th, 2023 meeting of the Planning Commission. Mr. Trainer, if you'd like to get us started by calling roll.
Sure. Ms. Friedlander?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Puentes?
Here.
Ms. Comont?
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Derek Hyra is going to be a little late, so I'm going to suggest that we reverse the order and start with the Community Energy Action Plan, and then get to the Quinn's application. So I'll mention that as part of our adoption of the agenda. With that modification, would someone like to move adoption of the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda for the Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, October 18th, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Puentes on the second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Okay, we have our agenda. We don't have anyone on the speaker series tonight. We can accept petitions to the commission right now if you like. I would also point out that we have two public hearings tonight on both the Community Energy Action Plan and the Quinn's application. So anybody who might want to speak on those two could benefit from perhaps hearing the staff report and the applicant's report, but as is our custom, we always let people choose as to when they would like to address the commission. So at this point, is there anybody who would like to speak to the commission? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, Commission. I'd like to speak to item 8 on the agenda tonight, which are the zoning cleanups. My name is Gene Grusko. I live on North Fairfax Street. I am part of the BZA, however, I speak for myself. However, being part of the BZA, I think I have some firsthand experience. The first item under that item 8 of the agenda is on attachment number 3 that you'll see later. Looking at line 391, of that it talks to when there's a building that has what I call a breezeway, where it's connecting garage and the main house by a 10-foot overhead, no sides, and it's considered as one whole. It's a unique situation. I think we have one on Midvale. The only thing I would suggest on that, starting at line 391, they say that every component of that house and attached garage via the breezeway has to fall within the front setback and the sides. It doesn't mention the rear. I think to be consistent, it should also include the rear setback, just as any house has to fall within setbacks of either R1A or R1B. So that's my first suggestion that you can debate over. My second comment relates to attachment number 4 in that same section. And in that, it's like the third item down on attachment 4, where it's talking about changing from BZA approval to administrative approval. And here's one where, again, in my time on the BZA, we've had two such instances. In a nutshell, it involves, just as an example, suppose this lectern here was the first floor of a building. Next to it is a 2-story. And say the folks want to add above here a new family member, et cetera, or wanted to put a home office in this above this space. However, this space, this first floor, is maybe too close. Maybe it needed 15 feet under R1A, and it's only 9. because maybe way back when, before the code was currently established, people were able to put in that, right? What I'm saying here is, I think it's fine to make this administrative, since we pretty much approved those. My only suggestion, though, is it can only do that if it's within, not closer to 7.5 feet. Reason I say that is if you look at the city charter 48-1102B, that's what it says is the closest you can put something next to someone else, 7.5 feet, if it's a non-conforming lot. So I contend, so in my example, if you're 6,
Could you wrap up your comments, please?
I am. So I'm just saying, I think that's fine, as long as it's not within the 7.5 feet. That's my 2 comments.
Okay, thank you. Just for clarity, Mr. Stoddard, we're not taking any action on those items tonight, right? They haven't been formally referred to us yet?
Correct. The proposed zoning cleanups, council held the first work session last week. They're scheduled to consider first reading next month.
Right. So, but we'll take a note of those items and get into them when they are formally before us. Mr. Trainer, any other speakers at this time?
No other registered speakers that I have.
Okay, very good. I think we're set then to go ahead with the Community Energy Action Plan. Is that correct? All right, I invite Mr. Young up. Good to see you again.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. So the purpose that we're here for this evening is the Planning Commission's requested to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council on the Community Energy Action Plan. And staff's recommending, a positive recommendation on the plan, and we'll get into kind of the details on that here in a second. So the purpose of the plan is to provide a roadmap for achieving reductions in community-level greenhouse gas emissions. The city's adopted COGS regional goals of a 50% reduction in emissions below 2005 levels by 2030 and 80% by 2050. This plan builds upon the city's existing environmental programs and provides a prioritized set of strategies and actions for the city government to take. And so to help kind of drive that prioritization point, 90% of the city's emissions today come from transportation and buildings. And so the recommendations in this plan focus on those 2 areas. So the initial draft plan was released to the public on September 13th. We had a session with you all last month on September 20th. Since then, staff's revised the plan in response to comments from the Planning Commission, the ESC, and from the public. And what's before you today is an updated draft plan for consideration. So the plan consists of 5 core strategies and associated actions. So number 1, enhancing car-free alternatives. Number 2, accelerating the shift to electric vehicles. Number 3, improving efficiency and electrification of existing buildings. Number 4, minimizing the carbon impacts of new development. And finally, number 5, increasing on-site solar adoption. So I'll take a couple minutes and talk a little bit about what's new. And rather than kind of walk through the individual comments, I'll hit on three core areas of feedback I think we've received. So first of all, I'm appreciative of all the feedback we received. I think this session last month was really good. We had a hearty discussion with the Environmental Sustainability Council and got some really good feedback from the public as well. So of the 3 core areas, the first one I'll talk a little bit about, we got some feedback and desire from the public. We want a plan that meets the 50% and 80% reduction targets, right? And then kind of as part of that, we had a section in the draft plan that talked about additional actions to take in the future, and we want some clarity and understanding of those. And so, if it's okay, Jack, do you have those slides available? We'll if you can pull those up for me real quick, and then go to slide 3. So some of this material you've seen before, so I'm not going to rehash all of it, but I did want to talk through a couple pieces real quick. So to kind of break down that big emissions reduction goal, we said, okay, how do we break that down into some major, some areas where the city can get their arms around it and make an impact, right? And so Of our 5 strategies, 2 of them are focused on transportation. The first one's reducing vehicle miles traveled, driving less, right? And so we're setting a target of a 20% reduction in VMT with the city. This is the most aggressive goal in COG's regional models. And between the regional actions that are taking place, of which Falls Church is a part, as well as the unique opportunities I think we've talked about previously we have here in the city with our size and dense development, we think this is possible with the actions we've kind of proposed. The second, we've set a goal of 50% of new cars purchased in 2030 will be electric. This is in line with the state of California's aggressive electric vehicle adoption goals. California has been at this game longer than Falls Church in the state of Virginia, so this is a big challenge for us, but something we need to shoot for. For buildings, we've targeted a 13% reduction in energy use. And so this number, 13%, where do you get 13%? Well, so we've identified, a goal of a certain number of buildings that would get weatherization, insulation improvements, new windows, those kinds of things, and then have targeted the end-of-life replacement of existing equipment. So think about when your furnace is going to die or your hot water heater, instead of replacing it with your existing gas equipment or inefficient equipment, the goal would be the city helps residents make a choice to replace those with electric, efficient equipment and the like. And so when you think about what we've got in the city of Falls Church, what's going to happen over the next number of years, our consultants have kind of mapped it out and think this is what's possible. New developments, that's, trying to steer those new developments to as kind of efficient and electrified facilities as possible. And then from a solar standpoint, we're targeting 5% of the roofs here in the city to have solar by 2030, which is up 3 to 4 times from what we have today. So, Jack, if you can do me a favor and go to the next slide. So that kind of shows you kind of what we saw this previously, so won't dwell on this one, but this is kind of how that shakes out. And then one more for me, please. So then there's the question of what's left, right? And so, to talk a little bit, about this. So when you look at 2030, a big chunk of the remaining emissions, come from vehicles, on-road transportation, and building electricity and what they call building stationary fuels, or like natural gas use, right? And so as we've kind of talked through, well, what else can we do? Are these the right assumptions? Kind of the challenges with meeting the 2030 goal, or there's 4 of them. I've listed 3 on the slide. So the first one is there's just not a lot of time left, right? Only so many people are going to buy a new car in the next 5 years, or are going to buy, whose hot water heater is going to die, those kinds of things. So that the scale of adoption to do more than this requires people to buy those things when they don't need to, and that's a kind of a tougher ask of folks to make those kind of investments. And so, so that's why we've kind of framed things around an end-of-life replacement. I mentioned the on-road transportation emissions, like that's a big change, right? And 50% EVs by 2030 is a big change already. Trying to go more than that, like there's limits to what we can do with that. I think the last thing I'd mention with this is all of this is also being done in the context of the city of Falls Church continuing to grow. So when we talk about building emissions dropping, or energy use dropping 13%, think about kind of all the existing buildings in the city are dropping 13%, but we're also offsetting all the growth in the city as well. And so 13% doesn't sound like a big change, but in effect, when you add the growth of the city and stuff on there, it's pretty significant. So I think to close this kind of point of feedback out, right? We had a reference into the original draft report about renewable natural gas. Got feedback from a number of people about, hey, like, is that a real thing? And is that something the city should be relying on? We've taken that out of the report. And I think most importantly, as we kind of listen to everybody and try to kind of figure out how to frame this up, one of the recommendations we got is, hey, rather than a report just being done here in 2023, let's come back to it in 3 years and see what see, A, what progress the city has made, but what other opportunities are available to us, right? If you think about 3 years ago, from now, like some of the things we're recommending in the report and that are possible today weren't probably top of mind and possible back then. The picture in 2026 is going to be different. So the second point of feedback we got from a number of sources is inclusion of additional actions, right? Hey, you need to, what about this? And, some other suggestions. And, appreciate the interest in those actions and, agree they're priorities for the community that we should be conscious of and pay attention to. But, and we've tried to include those in the reports in a couple of different areas. But as far as kind of including them in our core recommendations on actions, I go back to the 90% of the emissions come from transportation and buildings. We've tried to kind of stay true to that to prioritize the city's actions. So why do people rob banks? That's where the money is. Why are we focusing on these two areas for emissions? That's because that's where the emissions from the city are coming from. So the last kind of point of feedback I think we got from a number of areas is, hey, we'd really like more detail, right? And more details on the cost, the impact, and the execution. I think to build trust with you all, the community, the city council, that these recommended actions, if they're resourced, will be successful. While there's some limitations to be able to do that with all of the content of the report, we've tried to beef up this next step section, which are the kind of priority actions that we're recommending the city kind of move on to next. In that vein, to try and provide a little more detail as to how we think those things can be done and hopefully tee things up well for the upcoming kind of budget cycle considerations. So with that, our future schedule is we've got a final conversation with the ESC tomorrow night. We've got a whirlwind week this week on this topic. And then final action with the city council is tentatively scheduled for November 13th. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback you all have. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Before we get into comments and questions from the commissioners, Mr. Trainer, do we have any public speakers? And I should add before you answer that this is a public hearing for this item, so just to make that clear.
I do not have any registered speakers. If anyone is online looking to speak, please raise your digital hand and we'll call on you. But I'm not sure that we do.
Okay, very good. So with that, then, let me go ahead and open it up to the commissioners to see if you have questions, comments, suggestions. Anybody like to start out? Commissioner Coleman?
I can go first. I guess first I just want to say thank you for the I think relatively quick work on this. I mean, I think we kicked this off in March, and you can look at the schedule here. So it's a lot of I think smart strategies, a really robust plan, first plan, which we needed. I mean, not having one at all. So I really appreciate that. I think it's definitely, our goals are really aggressive, and so I do think, we have to be realistic about what we can get done by 2030. I really appreciate the prioritization of the strategies and, the efforts that you made to kind of give people a sense of how much impact each of these will have, how much they'll cost. I think that's important for the community to understand. On EVs, I think that 50% goal will be tough. In the report, you mentioned that the EV share was 6% in Virginia in 2022. I imagine it's higher in Falls Church City. They're expensive vehicles, and I think they're probably not. They may be purchased in more higher numbers here, but still, it's not 50%. I think that's the right approach, and I'm really glad to hear that we're planning to revisit this plan every 3 years, and the idea of including annual progress updates, and I hope those will be shared with this commission annually. That is a really great idea to keep track of our progress and where we need to go. So I just thank you, appreciate all of the effort that you and staff have put into this.
Okay. Would you like to go? Sure.
So I want to thank you as well, and I want to echo some of Ms. Camont's commentary on how much work actually went into this. I think I have a lot of positives to say about it, and how much it has expanded in just a very short period of time. The energy audit program, I think that's a great step to help homeowners understand the step-by-step process in conjunction with that one-stop shop. I think, it made me think about the whole idea of my water heater, and trying to figure out what do we need to do now, because it's getting close, right? And I felt that this was a call to action as I was reading through the plan more and more. I really did appreciate the peer highlights too, to kind of see what our other jurisdictions are doing and maybe learning lessons from them as we embark upon it, as well as benchmarking our annual progress. I did have a question about the one-stop shop. Will there be kind of a link to the interjurisdictional website of certification or of certified contractors that people can go to, and then they get linked up, or they understand better what that certification means and to go look for it when they're interviewing contractors? Is that part of that?
Yes, I think so. I think one of the recommendations we got was about the city having a certification program. I think the path, with our scale of the city, the path is to kind of work with some of our neighboring jurisdictions. I know they're talking about, ways to kind of do some of those things. So some of it's a to be determined, kind of answer. I think there's a lot of great content on all of these topics out there. I think, part of our challenge is to distill that down to the key things that are helpful to people and organize it in a way that they can find it and use it. So that would be kind of one piece of many that I think we would try and incorporate.
So that actually brings me to my next question.
Okay.
So because we're talking about doing this in such a fast pace, right, to kind of catch up to, because we're a little bit behind to meet our 2030 goals, I saw that you had a budget earmarked for 50,000 request for the auditing of the program. Is that for homeowners' energy audit only, or is that also kind of how we're going to staff that first short-term burst?
So the $50,000 budget item you're referring to is kind of has been put in the proposed budget amendment that City Council's kind of in the process of kind of working through. It's been framed up to this point, kind of focused on let's put together a program that can help commercial buildings get their arms around this. That was one of the points of feedback that I got here over the last year of, hey, I know my building's got some problems, but I'm not sure where to start. And but we haven't figured out all the details of that. So I think there are incentives and helpful things out there for homeowners already in this arena, right? You can get you can get a tax credit to help pay for the cost of an energy audit for your home. I think where the city can help is, how do you go about finding somebody to do an energy audit of your home? What should be in it? I don't know that the financial piece of it comes as much into play. But the money we were talking about wouldn't be for staff. It would be for, to set up a program to kind of grease the skids and kind of move some actions forward.
These would actually be grants to commercial building owners to do an audit.
Correct, yeah.
I see. Okay, that makes some sense. Okay, so then my next question
Sure.
is, it would be great to understand what that staff plan would be for that short-term and long-term in order to support not only the point, your strategies you kind of broke down into different levels, right? Point 1,
Yep.
point 2, point 3, and I kind of took those as this is step 1, step 2, step 3.
Sure.
And so I felt like those step 1 and step 2s, that's something that we kind of want to attack right away in the first 6 months. So, but how are we going to help kind of grease the wheels to do that without staff?
Sure. But I'm happy to talk about that. Jack, could you do me a favor, go back to the slides real quick and I think the last one. So, I mentioned earlier, I think based on the feedback of kind of last month, we went back to kind of rethink kind of how we laid out the next step section to be a little more specific and get our arms around, like, what can we do, right? And so these are the 4 items I think, Ms. Freelander, you were talking about, right? So the one-stop shop, for a start, we're gonna see what we can get going with our existing resources. So our existing environmental sustainability position, and then kind of working with a couple other departments in the city to leverage some of our communication tools, some of our expertise on our building safety team, So as far as kind of getting information together and start getting that information available and out there to residents, I think we can kind of pull that off here in the next 6 months, kind of using our existing team. Some of it's on a pilot basis. We've talked about using staff office hours and things to help residents. We got to play that out a little bit and see how that works. Our building safety folks are really busy right now, right? But that's the plan. This is something we think we can at least get started with what we have, right? I think similarly with the energy audit program we were talking about a minute ago, okay, we can get our arms around that. I think the third piece where I talk about core program management, when we talk about the things that we moved on related to the government energy plan that was adopted by council in July, those 2 things we've talked about here, you start to we're kind of at a limit, right? And so we want to do annual reports on all this stuff and everything. That's going to take some staff time. And so just trying to kind of be transparent with everybody, I think that's where we can get to. And if we want to do other things in the report, is where we've kind of teed it up under number 4 here that need to become a discussion in city council work plan priorities for the coming year. And so the 4 we think, are worthy of consideration, kind of for next steps are related to EV charging support, a building improvements campaign for low and moderate income residents. We listed a number of tax incentives in the plan. We've got some staff work we would need to roll up our sleeves and work on that, as well as micro-mobility support. Do we want to do something for e-bikes and things like that? So, but those require either a reprioritization of existing resources within the organization or a conversation with council about additional resources in order to move forward. So does that help as far as kind of explaining?
Kind of. It seems like it would be good to understand, like, how much is it half a full-time person, or is it full-time person for that front end, or is it 8 hours a week for that first 6 months? Because my concern being is that if we're doing benchmark every 3 years, and we're doing an annual progress report, that means we don't know when there's a problem if somebody's stretched too thin. Like, how do we check in with that to see if people are really getting the help they need, or if there's a level of frustration because they can't get the help they need because everybody's stretched very thin?
So you mean beyond, in between the annual updates that would come on the overall kind of progress? Yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of see, how many people came in, how many were we able to help and address their questions, or how many are repeat questions from the same individual or the same issue or
Sure.
question, right? From
Yeah.
multiple people, right? So maybe there's a way to focus our communication out and marketing out, right?
Right. I think some of that is incumbent upon us kind of in the city government to kind of work through, right? Like we've said we were going to do some things, we got to figure out how to get them done. I don't know that I can answer, like, for the ones they're listed at the bottom, I can tell you how many FTEs those would take. With a lot of these, it also kind of depends on how far we want to go with some of them, right? And how much time that takes. And so I think as we move forward towards the city council work planning efforts that, after the first of the year, I think as the city staff, kind of tease up these and other items, we'll try and provide some of that color about what kind of level of effort these things are,
Yeah.
To make sure we can get them done.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you. Just quick, my comments really is the same as last time. I do think it's a mistake to have a really aggressive plan like this that doesn't try to, an aggressive plan for emissions reduction that doesn't try to disincentivize driving, the biggest share of the emissions. So I get that taxes on heavy polluting vehicles is challenging, controversial. I'm probably not ready for that, but things like removing parking minimums and road diets, I mean, these are being done in lots of different places. Judging from the comments from the boards and commissions around the Quinn project, I think the city is ready for that. I do think, again, I understand where we're coming from, but I do think it's a missed opportunity. I do look forward to seeing the work on that over the next couple of years. Thanks.
All set? Okay, my turn. I've got several kind of comments and suggestions here, but I'll try to get through these as fast as I can. First of all, thanks for all the edits you made to the plan. I kind of reading through it, it's clear that you did spend a lot of time making those edits, so thank you for that. You and I had an email exchange on HFCs and why they didn't show a decline, even though the federal government is going to require the industry to knock out about 85% of the emissions from that. And you said it's kind of hard to put that in the modeling right now, and I accept that. I think that's fine. So maybe there's just kind of a little bonus for us down the road as far as helping to achieve the goals. Appreciate your comment earlier on the renewable natural gas. I mean, maybe something will help happen there, but it's a little speculative at this point, and I think the way you've covered it in the plan kind of treats that in that context. I'd like to see us use some of the budget surplus for the community center ground source heat pump proposal, because that would produce, I think, a lot of savings and be a good example for the community. And I'd also like to see the analysis for that somehow factor in the savings. Right now, we just show the first cost, which always makes it look pretty scary. Which, given that it's over $2 million, it is pretty scary. But when you look at the savings in utility bills over time, that kind of helps moderate that. I'd like to see us update the 2050 goal. You've probably got that feedback from other sources, and you'll certainly get it tomorrow night from the ESC. And that's even though I helped get the current 80% reduction goal before council for them to accept that. At that time, that was the Kyoto Protocol, and that's what the Council of Governments was using. We're well beyond that now with the IPCC reports coming out recently. So. Our neighbors have adopted carbon neutral, so that's probably, if that's something that we can do without a lot of, anxiety and effort, it may be good to do that so we don't look out of step with our neighbors. Do have in the plan the need for a strong advocacy program for state legislation, and I'd just like to underscore that. I mean, we see the best benefit coming from reduced emissions from the VCEA-1 program from the state, so we can see how effective these state and, of course, federal programs could be in helping us get to reduced emissions. So, anything I think we can do to kind of beef up the need to work with our neighbors and work with our state delegation and see if we can't get some more improvements. It could be a better building code. It could be more autonomy for the city to adopt things that reduce our emissions. Getting a better community solar plan. There's just a couple of examples that would have, I think, a pretty significant impact on reducing emissions. So hopefully that's something we can work on. Let's see. I think you mentioned in there the need to change the special exception criteria, and I don't know if that needs to be specified a little bit better, and I think that may be something that you'll work with the ESC on, but I think there's some opportunities to kind of drill down on that and ensure that with our new developments that we get the best in terms of emissions reductions as possible. I'd like to echo Commissioner Friedlander's comments on the staffing. There's a lot of things that are in the plan here with the one-stop shop. It includes things like social media campaign, updating the website to link with a lot of other places, create educational videos, distribute emissions reduction flyers, review permitting requirements, a lot of things that I think at this point you're anticipating can be rolled into existing staff capacity, and that it seems a little optimistic. I mean, I hope that's right, but I don't think we should be too hesitant in saying we're going to need some staff if we're going to get to these goals, if we're serious about reducing emissions. It's not going to happen by itself, and you usually need to have some good staff folks, to do that. So, I would encourage you to be bold and see if there aren't some ways to at least start to get the need for additional staff before City Council. In that regard, I'm kind of curious, how soon do you think we'll be able to replace the environmental sustainability coordinator position? Since you've kind of moved up to a much grander position, that position, of course, will be essential for us to make progress on the emissions plan. Do you have any thoughts on when that will happen?
I don't know about the grander part, right? But, so we're in discussions about kind of an interim plan, so the other duties or whatever that I'm working on right now are on an interim basis for the moment, so can't really go hire a permanent backfill for the environmental coordinator because I might go back to it, right? So, so there's some interim nature of this that we're working through, but we're having some discussions. I think the big push over the last month has been this plan, which I've been involved with, for a while now, and we wanted to make sure we saw that through. But it's something I hope we'll kind of have a clearer plan forward on in the next couple weeks.
Okay. Before we get to our recommendation, any other questions or comments that might have come up? No? I've got a couple of recommendations that I'll make when we get to our recommendation to council, so I'll just add those in at the end. So with that, if somebody would like to go ahead and make our motion here for the,
I can do it.
okay, please.
Whereas City Council has adopted a resolution reaffirming the council's commitment to take action to achieve the regional greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals developed by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and whereas the vision of environmental sustainability in the City of Falls Church incorporates energy efficiency and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions as core values that embody what the city is striving to achieve, and whereas the City Council included in its fiscal year 2023-2024 work plan the adoption of a community energy action plan to lay out practical steps the city government can take to help residents and businesses reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and whereas city actions to help residents and businesses increase energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions can provide additional benefits such as decreasing air pollution, improving resiliency, and saving money, and whereas the actions proposed in this plan will contribute to the Falls Church community meeting its interim goal of a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. Now, therefore, I move that the City of Falls Church Planning Commission hereby endorses and recommends that council adopt the Community Energy Action Plan as a guiding document for energy planning and programming, and that it be referenced in the city's comprehensive plan.
Is there a second?
I second.
Commissioner Friedlander on the second. Okay, I'd like to recommend a couple of additions. I guess we could add that in at the end there. Let me read these real quick to see if this meets with acceptance of fellow commissioners. First one is that council should revise the 2050 emissions reduction goal to achieve carbon neutrality in order to match the goals adopted by surrounding jurisdictions. The second one is recommend council consider adding more resources, including staff positions, in order to achieve the plan's goals. And just to clarify, that would be our recommendation to council. The third is recommend that City Council review progress on reducing emissions as part of its work plan on a regular basis, not just every 3 years when the greenhouse gas inventory is updated. Would those be
I would
acceptable?
accept those.
Okay,
Addition.
with that, Mr. Trainer, I can read them out again a little bit slower
Please.
for you to add. Okay, the first one is,
And just to clarify, Mr. Chair, you'd want those added underneath the motion itself, right?
would that be the best place to do
Yeah,
that?
I think, one, make clear that you're recommending a positive action on the plan.
Yes.
And then I think you could add another section that says, I further move that the council
Okay.
sort of
If you-
incorporate the following.
If you'd like to add that, Mr. Trainer. I further move. And what were your fine words there?
It's something along the lines of that the council consider, or that the council incorporate the following.
Consider the following is fine. Okay, the first one is council should revise the 2050 emissions reduction goal to achieve carbon neutrality in order to match the goals adopted by surrounding jurisdictions.
Sorry, to match the goals
In order to
adopted
match
by-
the goals adopted by surrounding jurisdictions. Okay, we recommend that council consider adding more resources, including staff positions, in order to achieve the plan's goals. And the third one is, we recommend that city council review progress.
Sorry, council view progress?
Recommend that city council review progress on reducing emissions as part of its work plan on a regular basis, comma, not just every 3 years when the greenhouse gas inventory, or when the greenhouse gas inventory is updated. Okay, thank you. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay, I think we can go ahead and take the vote. Mr. Trainer?
Just to clarify, I think you were making those an amendment, and I think before we typed them up, there was an acceptance by the motion maker and
Yes.
the seconder.
Yeah, does
Oh,
there
I'm
need to
sorry.
be another motion for me to, I can just
No,
say
no,
I
you can just
accept.
accept them. If the maker of the motion and the seconder both
you can
accept,
do it verbally.
you can move
Yeah.
forward.
Okay, we have acceptance?
I accept.
Okay.
All right. I should close, first of all, let me close the public hearing to any speakers at this point then. Mr. Trainer, if you'd like to call the roll.
Yes. Ms. Friedlander?
Yes.
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Comont?
Yes.
Mr. Hyra,
Yes.
now that you're here? And Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you all. Appreciate the support.
Yeah. Okay, I believe we're now ready to go to item 6, the Quinn Enterprises. Is that correct?
Sure.
Mr. Stoddard, would you like to get this started?
Sure, I'm happy to introduce it, Mr. Chair. So before the commission tonight is an application for it's actually a pair of actions related to the Quinn application, the Quinn proposal for redevelopment. The two items before you are, one, a recommendation on an amendment to the comprehensive plan and the future land use map designation for one of the parcels included in the project. And then the second item is an action to grant a special exception for the height allowance as well as the use within the building. The staff recommendation on both items is to make a positive recommendation back to council. I will note with the special exception recommendation, staff has identified a number of sort of cleanup items to be made in a subsequent submittal. And maybe I'll sort of speak to that element first, right? This is not the last step in the process for this project. That it's been reviewed by council over many work sessions, the boards and commissions over many work sessions. It'll be reviewed by you all, and you are scheduled to make your recommendation back to council tonight. And then after this, the applicant would then be expected to revise their materials again in response to all of the comments they've received and make a fresh submittal that council would review in late November. And then based on council's view of that resubmittal, final action could be scheduled at a later date. So by no means is this the end in the process, but it is, of course, an important step in the process. You all last saw this at a work session during your September 20th meeting. But before I get into the substance of the updates and the staff analysis, I'll turn it over to our case planner, Ms. Laura Arsenault.
And I'll just, before you start, just indicate that we'll hear from staff, we'll hear from the applicant, and then we'll open it up for any public comments.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stoddard. My name is Laura Arsenault, and I'm a principal planner in planning and zoning and case planner for the Quinn Homestretch application. I'm here to present a brief summary on the proposal. The applicant, Quinn Enterprises LLC, is proposing a new 10-story mixed-use building with a maximum height of 115 feet. The new building will have 233 senior dwelling units and approximately 282,500 square feet of gross floor area. The land use actions needed are a comprehensive plan map amendment and 2 special exceptions detailed from lines 115 through 123 of the staff report. Staff's request to the Planning Commission begins on line 5. The Planning Commission is requested to hold a public hearing on the Quinn proposal located at 350 and 360 South Washington Street and 303 South Maple Avenue. Following the public hearing, Planning Commission is requested to make a formal recommendation to Council. Updates to the materials in the Planning Commission work session start on line 66 of the report. Planning Commission last reviewed this application as a work session item on September 20th. On October 6th, the applicant submitted supplementary documents in response to the Planning Commission's direction, as well as comments received from other boards and commissions. The supplementary documents include architectural modifications to the building and loading dock, updated shadow studies, a revision of the parking reduction, revised voluntary concessions, among others. The applicant will be providing a presentation and walk through the slip sheets and modification that address PC comments. Following the Planning Commission's recommendation, the applicant will further refine the application materials, fully incorporate their intermediate submittals, and provide a complete third resubmission prior to the next council work session scheduled for November 20th. Staff continues to support a positive Planning Commission recommendation pending the third and final submission. City staff has reviewed the application for conformance with the primary and secondary criteria for review of special exception applications as outlined in lines 419 through 772 of the staff report. As a reminder, the primary criteria include compatibility with the city's comprehensive plan, the South Washington Small Area Plan and Design Guidelines. 2, new or renovated commercial and residential uses. And 3, the project will increase revenue to the city. The secondary special exception criteria include urban design, compatibility with surrounding uses, community benefits, transportation, and environmental sustainability. Staff recommends the following items be reviewed and refined based on analysis and meetings. 1, to ensure wastewater has adequate treatment capacity. 2, to revise building ground floor commercial layout, orientation, and programming to ensure the space is designed for flexibility of different uses. 3, revise shadow studies to show the full extent of shadows in all impacted buildings. 4, provide acknowledgement for Turner Hill Foundation. Please note that the applicant did provide a supporting letter received on October 16th and distributed to Commission. 5, provide nearby pedestrian and bicycle connections. 6, during the site plan process to further refine the TDM plan and parking management plan to ensure adequate parking supply. 7, during the site plan process, provide shade in the plaza areas. And 8, during the site plan process to provide details on passenger drop-off and designated spaces for rideshare. As for fiscal impact, there is no update to the fiscal impact outlined on line 769 of the report. Prior numbers will be adjusted with the final submittal. Moving forward for scheduling and timing, starting on line 723 of the report. Staff is anticipating a third submission by October 27th, 2023, followed by a council work session on November 20th. Minor revisions and council final consideration and action are anticipated in winter 2023-24. Next, the applicant will make a presentation on their updated proposal, followed by discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Zhang for your work on this as well. Mr. Painter.
I think I have all my notes. Thank you very much, Chair Stevens. Andrew Painter with Walsh Colucci, speaking tonight on behalf of the applicant in the case. This is the 4th time, I believe, that we have been in front of the commission on this case. If I can bring up my PowerPoint. Okay. And I was given a pointer at work today that I'm going to use, and it's the neatest pointer I think I've ever seen. What I would like to be able to do is go through the changes in some detail since you saw this back in September. And then I'll introduce Clint Brackman, who is our project architect, who is here with us this evening to walk through the architectural changes. Scott Hewitt, who is our landscape designer, he'll walk through sort of the changes to the landscaping. And then I'd like to spend some time talking about transportation, especially the parking side of things, because there was a lot of discussion at boards and commissions and then with the Planning Commission to make sure we have the right parking supply, that we're not overly incentivizing single occupancy trips, but at the same time making sure that we can meet the commercial demand there. And so we've spent a lot of time on that. Before I go any further, though, Paul Quinn, the owner, would like to say a couple of words. So, Paul.
Thank you. Kathy and I would like to say to the commission that we are extraordinarily pleased with the work that our team has done. We feel that they have been seriously responsive to each and every word that we have heard from council, commissions, various boards, and groups within the community. We liked what we brought to you before. We like it much more now, and we think that Mr. Painter will demonstrate the hard work that many people have done. The citizens, the folks who serve the community, and our team that is doing this. Specifically, we want to acknowledge Mr. Teeters, who's our principal coordinator of this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I echo those comments. I can tell you that oftentimes from a zoning attorney's perspective, you don't have a client that is as malleable and flexible and responsive as Mr. Quinn has and as Mr. Teeters has been as well. So let's see if this works. Okay. So to walk through a couple of the revisions, if I may. Starting from an architectural perspective, and Clint will share this with you. And by the way, we did go in front of the Architectural Advisory Board last week, and we received a unanimous recommendation of support for the revised architecture. But we did incorporate a 10-foot building step back on the east facade along Maple Avenue to respond to concerns that we heard about making sure that the building can relate a little bit better to the Virginia Village side of Maple Avenue. And then we also pushed the footprint of the building back at its northwestern corner, around the facade where the restaurant space was. And what that allowed us to do, at least, is to be able to enhance views into the park area, but also, again, be able to respond to concerns about how it relates to Virginia Avenue. We increased the building setback a minimum of 18 feet. Along Maple Avenue. There was a request last time to take a look at what Pearson Square has and what Reserve at Tinner Hill has, making sure that we're consistent. And that 18 feet is the narrowest that it is. It then widens out to beyond 20 feet, but for at least over a half of it, it will be larger than 18 feet. But that's just sort of at its narrowest point, but that is consistent with what we have on other properties. We recessed the loading dock. So we took a look at the potential of putting the loading dock in on South Washington Street, but we have a very narrow frontage there. We then looked at the potential of pushing in the loading dock from the existing parking lot that is immediately to the west, but that is property that we do not control. And then there's also topography issues and things lining up as far as the floor plates go. And so we said, okay, if we're going to keep it along Maple Avenue, let's recess it, let's provide additional architectural embellishment to make it look less like a parking garage and loading dock entrance. We added translucent doors as well to create sort of storefront type of loading. We did try to take a look at pushing through a corridor similar to Harris Teeter, how the trucks have a corridor with full turnaround movement, but the size of the building footprint does not allow it. We just simply do not have that. So keeping it on Maple Avenue is the best of the options that we analyzed, but we did take a look at that, and Clint can answer questions about that as well. The restaurant layout, if you recall from before, there was a restaurant on Maple Avenue, and there was the Reserve at Tinner Hill space. And the question was, can we get additional retail bays there and relocate the Tinner Hill space to the park, shrink down the size of the restaurant's presence on South Maple Avenue? And so we did just that, and we were able to wedge in 2 additional retail bays on South Maple Avenue. So it'll be 2 bays and then the restaurant. And so we did that. We were asked to take a look at universal design elements, both interior and exterior. So we now have a voluntary concession that requires universal design elements, which we would be providing anyway, just given the nature of the use of this building for all interior spaces. And then we had had Scott, our landscape architect, take a look at the ramping systems and ensuring there would be handrails and other types of things so that individuals of all abilities can move throughout the proposed park area. There was a request to install murals or banners or artwork, lattice work, or landscaping in front of blank facades. We really don't have any blank facades except facing the parking lot on the southern elevation. And you'll see images that do show murals and landscaping in front of it, but we did add in a voluntary concession requirement saying that we would not have blank facades. From an engineering perspective, Ms. Arsenault touched on this. An issue that the city is facing that I'm sure members of the commission know is the lack of sanitary sewer capacity. Fairfax will not have sanitary sewer capacity for, I believe, 5 to 7 years out at the earliest. There is an option to push it up to Arlington, which does have capacity and has preliminarily signaled that they would be willing to accept what, our sanitary if we can't get it from Fairfax. We are in the process right now of working out a voluntary concession with city staff that we can all agree to as far as what the obligations are from our side and from the city side. The city has also thought about doing enlarged facilities so that, if this project delivers a force main up to Arlington, that others can tap into it. But it's an issue that the West End is going to have to deal with, that really every project that comes through is going to have to deal with. So we're going to try to do our part at least and work with the city, to provide enlarged facilities if possible that others can tap into. The width of South Washington Street, again, we have a very narrow frontage along South Washington, but we did reduce the width of that by about 5 feet, and we were also able to add an additional tree, which I'll show you in a bit. Let me just move on. Yeah, I need to move to the slide. Oops. Maybe this isn't the best pointer. In terms of impervious cover, we reduced the amount of hardscape in the public park area. Think the pavers, think brick, that type of thing, by 8%. What that then did when we sort of reconfigured the space, it resulted in a 12% increase in landscaped area and a 6% increase in planting area. So as a result, the landscaping overall has improved. The tree plantings, which was already heavy, has been added to as well for additional shade. The total amount of open space is now above 69%, which is just remarkable for any mixed-use project that the city has seen, 70% open space. The amount of landscaped open space increased to 32%. The amount of publicly accessible open space has increased on this property to over 50%. The amount of private open space, which are all the terraces and rooftop amenity decks and things like that, increased to 18.47%. And the total amount of open space, again, is above 69%. We increased the tree canopy as well to about 18.5% of the property. Along South Maple Avenue, we looked at the streetscape design. We were able to wedge in another tree, to separate parking for some of our short-term parking spaces there. If you look at the facades along the park where the retail areas are going to be, there are columns, brick piers and columns that we've shown. We have added in biophilic planters there and arborvitae trees to sort of break that area up, but to have additional green scape at sort of the ground level. We looked at the South Washington Street entry plaza. There was a comment last time, and I need to move forward again. There was a comment last time that, you've got these 2 promenades, right? You've got the Fairfax Street right-of-way promenade on the north, and then you have this promenade connecting South Washington Street to that Fairfax Street promenade. What's going to entice people to come into the space? What's going to make it seem like they are welcome into the space? So we will do that, obviously, with wayfinding signage, with increasing views and stuff like that. But we did take a look at the entry plaza in particular, and Scott will walk through the concepts he has for some very fanciful, sort of playful moments that will draw people in. We also added seating and other things there too. In terms of transportation, Ariel is going to talk through this, but we have developed a parking management plan. That really goes to the enforcement mechanisms to make sure that people are not parking where they shouldn't be parking, that they're not overstaying the amount of parking, from an hours perspective and things like that. And she'll walk through kind of what that is. We updated our shared parking analysis, as I mentioned. We had meetings with the city to make sure that we have the right amount of parking supply. And so that is reflected in our updated shared parking analysis. We kept the same number of spaces. But because we reconfigured the Tinner Hill space and ran that as office, we were able to reduce our reduction from 21% to 14.4%. But it's all about just sort of how you paper it on the plan itself. It doesn't change the parking supply, but it does help with our shared parking analysis. We updated our transportation demand management plan. That is about reducing single occupancy trips from the property and making recommendations on ways to do so. That includes things like shuttle service as a potential idea that we are exploring. We have a commitment to complete all of our sidewalks prior to the first occupancy permit for the continuing care facility use. We have added delivery restrictions because, how much will the loading dock be used? There was a concern about smells, making sure that the doors are down anytime it is not in use and things are not coming in or out. But we did add restrictions on times that trash trucks and tractor-trailer deliveries can use it, and a requirement that no more than one truck delivery can access the parking or the loading dock at any one time. I'll also say, too, this is not like a grocery store where you cannot control the guy coming up from North Carolina and he's just going to drop it off at 4 a.m. We have the ability to schedule these deliveries for all of our tenants, for the retail, for the restaurant use, and for the medical office use, to make sure there are not conflicts. So it's a different kind of use, and we do have the ability to control when those deliveries are going to occur. We have increased the amount of EV conduit from 15% to 50%. That was a recommendation that we heard at boards and commissions and from the Planning Commission. So we will have 5% electric vehicle chargers day one, plus an additional 50% EV conduit. There was a request to consider an electric bicycle parking station. We have added one in the garage. That's where we're proposing it. But in our discussions over the last 48 hours, we have decided to add another one outside. Both would be proximate to the lobby and the retail entrances. One would be covered, one would not be covered, but we'll have two of them. We dispersed bicycle parking around the site. We got rid of the extraneous bus shelter and enrolled our cash and lieu contribution towards a bike share contribution. We have been working with KLNB as our retail marketing expert to analyze our plan from a viability perspective and how to curate the amount of retail. We went with KLNB because they have experience in the city of Falls Church at Pearson Square. They're doing all the West End stuff. They do George Mason Square as well as the Byron. So they have on-the-ground experience in Falls Church. They know this market better than anyone else, and we wanted to make sure that we had the right team in place. So Kelly Atkinson with KLNB is here tonight. We added a age restriction for the continuing care facility. We relocated, as I mentioned, the Tinner Hill space, and there was also a recommendation that we heard from boards and commissions that if Tinner Hill does not want it, that we be able to lease it out to the Chamber of Commerce. As Ms. Arsenault mentioned, we do have a letter of support from Tinner Hill that they are interested in taking this space, and we're happy to provide it to them. We have a requirement that there be, in our voluntary concessions, that there be a construction traffic management plan, that be done and approved either when the contractor is selected or at time of site plan, whichever is first in time. We upgraded our green building escrow language about the amount and how it's calculated, and we work with staff on that voluntary concession. We have rooftop lighting restrictions, and as I mentioned, the last bullet point there, obtaining a letter of support from the Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation. This is an excerpt from the draft retail marketing plan that KLNB has been working on. Again, that is in progress, but we have written into our voluntary concessions that this will be an attachment to it. It'll go along with the ordinance if council approves the project. So we will be required to abide by it. But you can sort of see the different spaces and the types of uses within the spaces. And I hope that after hearing from her, if you have questions for her, that you will agree that this is sort of spot on. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to, oh, no, I'm not going to stop talking. before I turn it over to the architect, I just want to show you where we've been in terms of our rendered site plans. This was our initial submission. This is what we came to you with before first reading. You can see that the building is a totally different shape. The setbacks, we didn't know where the plantings were going to be. We hadn't met with, the fire marshal to do sort of a building code analysis to where the building needed to be. Then we changed it and squared up the building. We captured additional open space. We added brick sidewalks. We narrowed the Maple Avenue street frontage per recommendations that we heard. But this is where we were last month. After going back to the drawing board again, this is where we are tonight. So you will see additional open space. You will see additional vegetation. You will see a reduction in the footprint of the building as well. These are all positive changes that we've heard, that we've been able to incorporate from boards and commissions, from staff, and from the Planning Commission. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Clint Brackman with Architecture Incorporated to walk through the architectural changes, and then we will hear from Scott. Clint?
Andrew's done a fantastic job of articulating what the changes are. If the lower thing doesn't work out, I think he's got a future in architecture because he did a great job. As mentioned, we've had an opportunity to present this project a number of times. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, and so we've made changes to address that feedback. I want to focus our presentation tonight on what those changes are, especially since we presented the previous design to this body in the past. And so one of the things that, having said that, we can cite that the parking levels have not changed. So we still have 3 levels of below-grade parking, plus a partial level on grade with 292 parking spaces available, including the same complement of EV chargers, storage, and bike parking that is in the parking structure. Is it the green one?
You have to get to, no, it's the blue one.
The blue one. Okay. Oop. There we go. But it's the first floor where you start to see some of the changes that we have made. And as was mentioned, well, before I say that, the way the slide is structured, the left image is the proposed plan. The smaller image on the right is the previous plan, and it allows you to contrast the two as we go through what those changes have been. So one of the more noticeable changes, or noteworthy changes, is the top right corner of the plan. We pushed that facade back from east to west approximately 10 feet to diminish the width of the facade that presents itself to South Maple Avenue. And that ultimately has the result of reducing the massing that's visible from South Maple Avenue, but also opening views into the park. Additionally, we reallocated the demising partitions on the retail tenant spaces interior to the building, as was mentioned, to increase the available retail storefronts that front South Maple Avenue. So previously we had 1 retail space and the restaurant, so 2 spaces total. We now have 3, including the restaurant facing North Maple Avenue. Or South Maple Avenue, sorry. And then the loading dock was another area that we wanted to study extensively. And we did exactly that. We looked at whether we could bring an entrance from the west, whether we could do some sort of a through drive, whether we could develop an interior loading condition, and none of those ultimately proved feasible for a variety of different reasons, among them being the turning radii of the truck, the grading differences that exist between South Maple and the top left corner of the site there, the northwest corner, as well as if a drive-through were to occur, the height requirement to get a truck through there, which right now you can drive through that with a vehicle, but to introduce a truck would take much of the MOB floor, which is the second floor, out, which is obviously revenue-generating space for the building, and so represented a challenge for the project. The second floor remains dedicated to medical office, just as was presented before. The top right corner is the 10-foot setback, as was mentioned previously, and that you'll see on each of the images as we go vertically in the building, because it is something that affects all 10 stories of the building. We reduced the width of the facade that faces South Maple Avenue. Similarly, on the third floor, this floor is still dedicated to memory care residents, as well as the IL and some of the AL amenity spaces. On the right, and it's worth noting that the amenity conference room that would be available to the community is also on this floor, located on the planned south area there, just north of the rooftop terrace, and would be accessed through the elevator core. So a member of the community come into the lobby of the building, access the elevator core, go to the third floor, and right off that elevator lobby, we'll be able to gain access to this conference room, and we do envision a complement of restrooms associated with that community room. The fourth and fifth floors also remain dedicated to their use, which is assisted living residences, and the main change to this as well is pushing that top right corner of the facade back 10 feet. Otherwise, the amenity complement remains the same, with rooftop access on a portion of the third floor therefore accessible from the fourth, and an interior two-story connecting stair to build a sense of community between the two assisted living floors. Things change a little bit when we get to the independent living floors, 6 through 10. And floors 6 and 7 have the same essential change at the top right corner of the plan. We'll push that back the 10 feet that you've heard me describe before. It gets different at the 8th floor, where we've introduced an additional setback to the facade. And this one is parallel to the center line of South Maple Avenue to pull the facade away from South Maple Avenue, which at the 8th floor creates an opportunity for balconies. Above the 8th floor, it's simply a reduced footprint to the floor plan to diminish the massing that once again presented itself to South Maple Avenue. And you can see that articulated here in this section view, where the notch sort of at the top right corner of this section demonstrates that recess that we've just talked about. So the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors have been pulled back to help terrace the facade that faces South Maple Avenue, again, with the intention of diminishing the overall scale that presents itself to that street. The approach to material allocation on the building has not changed. We continue to work through locating materials with recesses and shadow lines to create different zones on the facade that ultimately work to break down the visual scale of the building. The materiality as well has not changed. We continue to use simulated metal finish wood panels, as well as the terracotta dark gray and white panels that you see there, with a dark anodized aluminum window and door system planned for the building. We do have 2 brick colors proposed as well, largely for the lower elevations within the building, the pewter brick and the iron spot brick. And a change from what you've seen before is that the iron spot brick we've now allocated to really just emphasizing the retail spaces. So that half of the building that is the retail, the entry level for the resident lobby, is all the iron spot brick. The west side of the building from those locations around has all been revised to the pewter brick, again, to help de-emphasize those locations and tie into some of the changes that we're going to talk about that we've made at the loading dock and parking garage entrance on the north facade. So this is how that manifests ultimately on all the elevations, starting with the top left. That's our facade that faces the park, and you can see again the iron spot brick for the first 2 stories to make a pedestrian level scale for the facade material treatment that faces the park. And then as we go clockwise around the building, you have on the top right image the southern exposure, which is the South Washington Street access. Includes our main pedestrian entry and a parking garage access on that location with the iron spot brick capturing those areas. And the left-hand side of this plan has been revised now to include the pewter brick that wraps around, again, for this clockwise to the lower left view, which is our west facade, which continues to include the intended application of the artwork murals on that west facade, but this time articulated with the pewter brick. And then continuing clockwise around, the lower right image is our South Maple Street facade, which the right-hand side of where the loading dock and the parking garage entry are continues to be that pewter brick. To the left of that, which begins our retail, is again articulated with the iron spot brick. And so wanted to zoom in a little bit on some of the treatments that we're looking at the loading dock. Again, knowing that we've looked exhaustively at the potential to relocate that, found that to be infeasible, we still wanted to address the comments and diminish the aesthetic importance and impact of these features. So as you'll notice at the parking garage entry, we're now using 2 doors, 2 smaller doors for an in and an out condition in lieu of a combined single entry and exit for that parking garage component. Similarly, the loading dock door has been diminished in size to the minimum width and height required to service the trucks that are expected to come to the building. And then all of that area is recessed, most notably the garage and the loading dock entries. Those portions of the facade are recessed to exist within shadow lines on the facade. And then again, the retail portion to the left maintains its articulation with the iron spot brick. And the recess is a little bit similar to the example image that you see on the top right, with the strategy of articulating and emphasizing the retail to the left of the image is similar to the example image that you see on the top left of this slide. So this is how those changes manifest when you look at each of the perspective views of the 4 facades of the building, this being our South Washington Street facade. You see there the 2 doors to represent the in and the out for the parking garage traffic. You see also the glass 2-story volume that is our resident lobby for the building as well. And then on top of that, you see the green roof accessible from the community meeting room, which is on the third floor of the building, and then again, the balance of the massing of the facade consistent with the description provided. There's some features in the foreground on the landscape design that you'll see when Scott's able to present the landscape package. This is our park facade. You can see obviously the retail storefronts facing the park, the two-story iron spot facade, which is the dark brick facade, hoping to break down the scale of that facade relevant to the pedestrians that'll be within it. On the right-hand side of that elevation view, you can see the outdoor dining associated with the restaurant tenant that's envisioned on the right-hand side of this image. And you can notice that the right-hand side of the elevation, the full height, the 10 stories, is pushed back the 10 feet relative to the side on the left. You can make that out in this view. Similarly, at the top right corner of that right portion of the building, you can see the notch that I showed you in section where the building steps back on that facade that fronts on South Maple. This is our north facade, which does face South Maple. We talked about the modifications that we made at the loading dock area. You can see them there, recessed. Loading dock door diminished in size, the two in and out doors, or one each, one in, one out for the parking garage entry, all detailed using the iron spot brick with the left-hand portion of this, detailed with the pewter brick in the left portion of this, which is where the retail is, articulated with the iron spot brick. And then again, at the 8th floor line, a little bit higher up, you can see that recess that I mentioned where it creates a level of balconies for those 8th floor units and simply a diminished footprint of the building above that, sort of terracing, once again, the building back as it faces South Maple. Also, this is a narrower facade than previously presented to you by the 10 feet, because the left-hand portion of this facade has been pushed to the right, the 10 feet, and this does reflect that. This is our west facade. And again, the change here that's significant is the changing of the water table which is the two-story facade element, from the iron spot brick to the pewter brick. Again, trying to use that now as a material that really is iconic to the retail and the pedestrian entries to the building. We continue to preserve the spaces for the local artwork that would be on these walls. Otherwise, the amenities that you see, for example, the third-story courtyard for the memory care resident is all consistent with what you've seen before. And then the architectural treatment on the right-hand side of the 10th floor using a different material to, again, help break the scale down of even this facade as we look at how the building materiality is articulated. I want to take a moment just to talk about how our storefronts are envisioned to develop. You might have noticed in some of the views of the storefront entries, there's there's a bit of a uniformity to how those are handled. It's largely a full-width glass entry with an awning above it. That's intentional because we know those likely are going to be replaced when tenants are identified to take those individual spaces. Each tenant who comes into a retail space like this, especially with a new build-out, is going to have an opinion about what they want their facade to look like, largely to comply with their existing brand standards. So our approach has been to design facade that supports the development of those individual facades with a fairly simple glass and awning system that can be removed to accommodate the tenant's design as it is developed. And so I just wanted to point that out because it will ultimately lead to additional diversity of those facade elements as those tenants are involved. We simply can't know what those are right now because those tenants have not been identified at this point. This is a view looking from South Maple back towards the building with the restaurant there on the corner and this outdoor dining element. This view is intentionally prepared to remove any trees so you can see exactly what the facade will look like. Again, facing with the three retail storefronts on this side, the change in materiality in the distance where the loading dock and the garage entry are. And then these are pedestrian views that we've created around different portions of the site to give you a sense of what it would be like to walk around the building. Top left view is the entrance to the main residential entry to the building off of South Washington with an avenue to the park there to the right, a glass entry condition into the lobby. And to reiterate the way that the parking on the first floor is designed, there is a path of travel through the lobby and out to the park. You can't see it in this view because it's behind some of the landscaping, but as we start to look at the landscape plan, that path of travel will be evident. The top right view is a view looking to the north along the face of the facade that faces to the park with the the retail outdoor dining component visible in the distance as you look towards South Maple. The image on the lower left is that same South Maple perspective, but in this case with the trees left in place. Those are trees that are called out to be on both the landscape plan and the civil plan as street trees, so they will be there. We feel this is more representative of what the actual installation will look like, but nonetheless wanted to show you both conditions. Then the lower right corner reflects the view largely to the south of the park facade with the retail components that face the park. And there's additional view of the outdoor dining here, and our landscape architect, Scott Hewitt, will discuss further detail about how the park itself is articulated. This is a street view looking to the west of South Maple with the building on the left, showing the building in situ. This models what we have in the landscape architecture plan, the civil site plan, and the building location to ultimately show you a faithful representation of what we believe the mature installation will look like upon completion of the project. And this is a similar view looking to the east, again, modeled using the same curb lines, the features and components of the civil design, the landscape architecture design, the building location, to once again give you somewhat faithful view of what we believe the final installation will look like and how it will address South Maple Avenue. And with that, I think my slides are exhausted, and I would turn it over to Scott Hewitt.
I hope so.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. I really do appreciate all the comments everyone's made during this process. It really helps us as designers refine our process and really look at everything, differently every time we redesign it. How do I forward?
It's this one right here.
Oh, thanks.
And then the green is the pointing.
Great. Let's start at Washington Street. So, the architect went over, and Andrew, what we were doing, when we really look at this again, we started to straighten out the access to the building. Before it was on an angle. We really wanted to clean this up to make this more, approachable and connect pedestrian access into the space better. And in doing so, now we have 2 street trees. Before we only had 1, so now we can kind of frame this entrance better. One of my ideas to draw people into the space, and based on some of your comments about adding additional shade to the space, to the plaza spaces. So what I thought we could do is have kind of a sculptural shade structure element right here as like a little forest of like trees. And I'll show you in some precedent images. I came up with a little sketch myself, and then I Google things and find this has been done before. So some things are off the shelf and some things are sculptural, but this is an opportunity to add, something whimsical and fun and sculptural and draw you into this space. And then what we were doing on this side of the building here, comments about reducing paving on the site. So we were able to push the open green space. We were able to enlarge this space and reduce the space here. And then with some of the articulation of the architecture now with the retail spaces and where the doors are, and incorporating all these little planters along the building here. So it's green on both sides. And then kind of universal design and really looking at this corner, there's a grade difference, almost a story grade difference between the restaurant on this side and coming down. So now some of this is more ramp and stair. So it can accommodate everyone, but there's different options. So it's not just one option or another separated. So now this is ramping in here, and there's stair here. And then Maple Avenue is another, concern that everyone had. And one of the things we wanted to do is have more regular street tree planting. So before we had 2 trees kind of, next to each other, and then 1 large short-term parking. So now we have 2 short-term parkings, and they're spaced, regularly with 3 street trees. And underneath, instead of just having the standard, tree pit, they're a little bit larger landscape areas. And the landscaping, if you can envision, is similar to the library street trees. Underneath, they have all the nice perennials and native plantings, so it's not just going to be, street tree and a mulch tree pit. And then we were able to kind of take the curve here, so we're following the street with the sidewalk in a more normal way and expanding the restaurant space out here while the architecture goes straight. So it feels like a sidewalk that continues to connect to where it exists over here. And we're going to articulate that with the brick, similar to what's down here. And you can barely see it here, but there are some plantings, again, in front of the retail space to separate, some of the doors and, again, add some green and really create a more green space on both sides of the sidewalk. And just in general, like, when doing all this reduction in paving here, we were able to add some extra planters in here. And I know we talked about pervious paving and stuff, but with adding some planters, now we can kind of drain a lot of this into some of these planters and use them as like filtration planters. So they kind of add, more green, but also will help with the stormwater management and filtration. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Ariel Jarvis from Grove Slate. Ariel, are you there by any chance?
Yep, I'm here. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, and actually, I'm sorry, yeah, would you explain the entry plaza real quick? I'm sorry, Ariel, premature.
Sorry. So here's my sketch. This is what I was doing at first, and you can see a blow up here and like how these could be just as vertical and shade. And then lo and behold, there are things, and some of these are around the world, but these right here are off the shelf, actually. A company now makes these where they have little benches under them and they're little like kind of abstract trees. And you can see it's just definitely more fanciful and some other interesting options. But I thought that would be a great, way to create a draw into the space and provide shade and, yeah.
Looks like the one is the Frank Lloyd Wright Johnson Wax building in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's the revised rooftop plan, which we can skip over for right now. But that does include now approximately 6,300 square feet of green roof, vegetative roof on the top. Okay, so Ariel, can you walk through this slide and the three big deliverables that your shop has been working on?
Yep. So, hi everyone, Ariel Jarvis from Grove Slate. So I just wanted to walk through the shared parking analysis we put together, as well as the parking management plan and transportation demand management, or TDM plan. So starting with the shared parking analysis, so our analysis was based on the methodology published by the Urban Land Institute in their shared parking manual. This is the industry standard for shared parking analysis, and it's also the method expected by staff in the city. So this methodology involves first determining what the base parking supply would be. This is the number of spaces that would be needed if spaces could not be shared by the uses, if we had to provide parking for every single use individually. But since spaces will be shared amongst the land uses in this project, that parking supply can be reduced. And so once we were able to determine what that base parking supply would be, we then applied hourly factors based on the time of day and which use needs parking and when. Like, for example, office utilization is very high from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., but very low overnight. So office does not need 100% parking for 24 hours. So we apply these hourly factors to the base parking supply for each land use to determine the actual parking demand. And so using this methodology, we determined the weekday peak hour was 2 p.m. and the proposed supply of 292 spaces would accommodate the demand that we determined. So that was the shared parking analysis we put together. And then as for the parking management plan, so because the parking supply was right-sized to meet the parking demand but not overly exceed it, we needed to prepare this parking management plan to outline strategies that could be used to manage the parking supply. And so prior to preparing and submitting this plan, we did have a meeting with city staff as well as a parking management consultant to discuss the parking supply and how it would be managed and enforced. And so the plan that we prepared details the layout of the garage, how spaces will be managed, and also how the loading dock will be managed, and strategies that the developer can implement. So, for example, the operator can unbundle parking from resident leases and or limit the maximum number of spaces allowed per resident. And the operator can manage visitor parking by setting time limits or charging a fee after a certain amount of time, for example, after 2 hours. And then if needed, the operator can also implement parking enforcement strategies, which are also outlined in the parking management plan. For example, license plate recognition to identify if there's been any parking violations in the garage. And so that kind of summarizes the parking management plan. And then related is the TDM plan that we put together. And this plan outlines strategies to help reduce single occupancy trips during the peak hours. And so this plan includes strategies that the operator can implement that have been proven to disincentivize driving alone while incentivizing other alternative modes of transportation. So for example, a strategy that's already been touched on is a shuttle service. So the developer actually is already planning to have a shuttle service. They'll have a 12 to 15 person passenger van as well as a sedan, and this service would be able to provide transportation to desired destinations such as taking people to the metro, doctor's appointments, errands, nearby events. And this service would eliminate the need for some residents to have a car because they could use this service, and also potentially help employees and visitors get to and from the site without a car, because the shuttle service could, say, pick up a visitor from a metro station. And so this TDM plan also includes details on how we'll monitor the effectiveness of these strategies through surveys given to the residents, and also conducting vehicle trip counts at the site after the building has been opened and is operational to ensure that there actually has been a reduction in peak hour trips.
All right, thank you very much, Ariel. And that concludes our presentation. I know it's a bit longer than we've had previously, but there's a lot of good changes to share, and we wanted to make sure that we had the experts here in person to answer any questions. So thank you for your indulgence.
Okay, well, thank you for all of the speakers. And before we take our turn, let's open this matter up to the public to see if there's anybody who would like to address the commission. Mr. Traynor?
I have no in-person registered slips. If there's anyone online, please raise your hand.
Let me just ask, in case there is someone here who would like to speak on this matter, now's the opportunity to do that. Seeing none, I think we can go ahead and close the matter to the public then, and let's turn it over to the commissioners to see what's on our minds. Would someone like to start off sharing their thoughts? A lot of architectural items here. Commissioner Friedlander, we're all anxious to hear what you have to say.
All right, I got the short straw to start. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the. I do recognize the amount of work that's gone into making a lot of these revisions and kind of some changes to the documents. I think that's helpful to see. I do appreciate some of the perspectives. I do wish that there were more, and I'll get to some of my questions in a minute, but I am excited about the programming of this facility. I think it's a really fabulous use of the space, and I'm really excited for, to see it further develop. It seems like there's I do have a lot of questions, so maybe you'll be able to get to some of them today, but I think there's probably some that will be lingering out there for some time. which is understandable because you're at the very beginning of conceptual design and schematic design. But first of all, I do have a tremendous amount of concern with the height. The sectional views that you provided in the first packet were very helpful and useful. However, you were comparing this development to One City Center, which is a special exception that has not been approved. And so I don't think it's applicable to compare the height to this because it does stretch to that height. It also compares itself to Harris Teeter, which is 40 feet. The grade of the base of Harris Teeter is 40 feet higher than the average grade base of this project, and yet it still stretches to be almost the same height as Harris Teeter. And when I look at that and I look at the grade change as it goes down towards Tinner Hill and Pearson Square, I grew concerned about the overall impact of that additional height as the grade goes down. I would like to see the comparison with the more adjacent properties. So you've got the Tinner Hill, which was an approved special exception for height. The Pearson Square project, which you would see it in context. I appreciated your perspectives at the street level to kind of give us an idea of what that's going to feel like for the pedestrian experience. But I think seeing that full height and the massing of that, I think is going to be very important in order to kind of understand that a little bit better. And I think it's hard because a lot of those properties are outside of the site plan of your own project, but I think there is an impact that needs to be visualized there. And I think for not only the general public, but also for the decision makers and the key stakeholders in the adjacent areas. It would be important to also show in that sectional view is the abutting resident district and what those currently are versus what is their by right maximum should that ever be redeveloped. Because I do acknowledge that there are areas that could be redeveloped. We don't know if that is one, in any time soon. So those residences right now are very short in comparison to what is here. And I think because there's a requirement to kind of taper to an abutting residential district, I don't see that tapering along Maple. I do see a 10-foot step back at the 8th floor, and I'm curious to know what the floor-to-floor height is and what that height is at the 8th floor, where that 10-foot step back is. Just to have an understanding of that, because in my math, my simple math on that, it exceeds 75 feet. But on the west side of that stair tower, there is no step back. And so the residences are directly across the street from the west side of that stair tower. And so it is a blank wall. And that is one thing that I think is very difficult to reconcile, that extra height at that location because of what is right up against it. I do notice that the setback is 18 feet, and you had mentioned it very quickly what the setback is at Pearson Square, and Tinner Hill is 18 to greater than 20?
I think so. And Karen, I don't know if you can check on exactly what our setback is, but it at its pinch point down near where the garage is, it's 18 feet, and then it widens out from there.
Yeah, because there are gathering spaces outside of all
Correct.
of those areas. And so I would support increasing that setback in addition to some tapering along South Maple. I still have a lot of concerns about the overall height at that location, and then also to the west, only because the grade goes down. And so it would be important to kind of show that grade change and see some of those long perspectival views down the street to kind of see how this mass is being context sensitive in breaking up some of those volumes. I'm just not seeing it right now. I see a lot of change of color, which is almost like a victory in elevation to kind of make it appear that it's moving and that there's some kind of boring out of volume, but it's literally a wall along South Maple. And I would be curious to see some of those. I'm curious why we haven't seen some of those yet to date. Let's see. And then the loading dock. I do appreciate you guys bringing up the studies of the loading dock. I am curious about the logistics of those. It looks a little small considering the programming of that building. You've got medical office waste, you've got assisted living waste, and I'm assuming that also has some medical waste components, which needs to be kept separate from the regular restaurant and kitchen waste and retail waste. And I just don't see that space in that loading dock. I'm curious to see what that logistics, if you have a logistics plan that shows the turning radii and how you've actually investigated bringing that inboard into the garage. I do recognize that Target or the Tinner Hill loading dock is off on the street, but you also don't have a residence that's literally right in front of it. So I have some questions just surrounding that logistics of the loading dock. I would like to ask you how I did not see the traffic impact analysis. I saw it come through today, very late in the afternoon. It's a lengthy report, but how have the turning lanes and the entrance, the vehicular access in and out of the South Washington side, how does that work? There are several pinch points along South Washington at those intersections already. So I think stacking up a left-hand turn into that facility is, I would like to see that investigated some more. Let's see. I do have a question also about the conference room availability for the nonprofit or the city boards and commissions. I'm curious how that's managed, if anybody can, how somebody knows that's even available, and how is that managed? For the retail and the restaurants, I see that the restaurant is still along Maple. I do appreciate the additional perspectives of that space to see how it activates the street. However, I'm curious you actually answered it. You started doing the programming, and I saw the marketing brochure that you're starting there. I'm curious how you're going to activate those retail shops down in the park space. I appreciate for the restaurant, I saw in your voluntary concessions that you are providing mechanical access that goes through the roof. Is that centrally located for, in case that restaurant, breaks up into two different restaurants that should be centrally located to the tenants? But also I'm curious to know if grease traps are also included in those voluntary concessions, just to make that a more attractive lease for a restaurateur. And for the amphitheater park, how are you addressing the universal design aspects in the programming of that space? I see a lot of grass, which is great, and I love all the open space, don't get me wrong. And I understand the need for leaving it open so that it's flexible. But the intergenerational programming doesn't necessarily lend itself always to someone with mobility issues to get down and sit on the ground. And so I was looking at how those ramps might work, and maybe those are walls that are landscaping seating, but there's so many ramps, and the scale at which I was reviewing the drawings, it made it really difficult to understand how there's flexible seating for people who are mobility challenged and can't sit on the ground or stand for a very long period of time. I was curious, too, how you propose to preserve the night sky with your rooftop gardens, which I absolutely am excited about, the idea of having such an extensively green roof up there. I did notice that the hours of lighting operation extend on the weekends later, so I was concerned a little bit about how that works with the night sky and any effects on wildlife that there could be, since right now there's not a lot down there that's super bright. You touched on my questions about parking, and I think that was it for me for now.
Thank you.
Thank you for indulging me.
The night sky, I'll just take them in random order if I can. The night sky times, that was coming from the Environmental Sustainability Council. That was their recommendation. And so that's, we basically copied and pasted that right into the concessions. And if we were able to get a restaurant operator up there or something like that, those are the hours that we would want for, that you would see at the Perch over in Tyson's or any of these other rooftop bars that are popular. I'm going to let Scott talk about the universal design aspects and the ramping. I will say, though, if you can zoom in, there's an abundance of seating built into the bench walls and stuff like that on the promenades. Not sure how we would tackle the seating areas, in the grassy areas. There's certainly concepts that we can look at, but Scott can speak to that. The restaurant ventilation, I believe, is centrally located and supposed to be ventilated for spaces. It's primarily for the restaurant, but if it does get demised into two different spaces, then I think they could pretty much use the same ventilation. And I believe that we would include grease traps as well. Let me see, the conference room for the nonprofits, how will it be managed? We will, and I think, we were talking about this yesterday. I think we need to change our voluntary concessions coming out of tonight and say that we will establish the rules for the operation of those spaces at time of, prior to site plan or prior to certificate of occupancy. And then how do people know that the space is available? We're not going to take out an ad in the news press, but we could let people know in the lobby that it's available, or let the city manager's office know so that it can be distributed to boards and commissions and other groups. One of the things that we also thought about too was, could there be a central repository that would be on the city's website of all the publicly accessible spaces, library, high school, rooms here, et cetera. The traffic impact analysis about the turning lanes in and out of South Washington. Just to be clear, we would love to have that be full access, but we actually ran that in our traffic study as right in, right out. So it's not even supposed to have a left turn there. Now, for emergency vehicles, they would be able to jump those, CG 45 curbs or whatever it happens to be to get in, because, we have multiple jurisdictions that respond to emergencies in the city. So people would be coming potentially from Route 50. To come up Annandale and over, from Merrifield or wherever. The loading dock, as far as being small for programming. So we do have some preliminary numbers that I could share with you, because you raised all the right, the right terms. So for the senior housing, the fresh food deliveries, we're anticipating 3 of those per week. For non-perishable food deliveries, once per week. The trash recycling and pickup twice per week. Medical waste pickup it would be 1 to 2 times per month. And Andrew, you may want to speak to that because that seems like a really low number. But based upon your experience, it's 1 to 2 times a month. There's also linen pickup and drop off that would be twice per month. And then there would be package deliveries, your FedExes, your UPSs, your Amazons, that would be daily. So that applies to the senior housing. And then we asked Grove Slade to take a look in their experience about the combined medical office, retail, restaurant spaces. You can anticipate approximately 3 to 4 package deliveries per day, 8 to 9 truck deliveries per day. Those are single unit trucks, which Errol, you can speak to, and 1 trash pickup per day. So those are the, it's not every day, all day long. A lot of them are staggered. And I think we've looked at the number of loading spaces that we have relative to these anticipated deliveries and trash pickups, and think that we've arrived at the right amount. But we can certainly continue to look at that as well.
I think I'm also concerned about the sheer footprint of each dumpster or trash receptacle for those, just to see that layout and understand that logistics, to see, are the trucks pulling in? Are they dragging dumpsters out on the street to flip them? Or are they hitching them up and dragging them out and putting in a new empty one? And how does that work?
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to step in and answer some of this.
The way that we currently conceive the loading dock, in order to, again, diminish the presence on the facade, we want to have one roll-up door which will allow a truck to back in and access the dock. Off to the side of that space where the truck would be is where we would have our trash receptacles, trash, recycling, red bag. All of those would be on wheels, so when the trash truck comes to pick up the waste, they would be pulling those out into the center, hoisting them, and then rolling them to the side.
Yeah, thank you.
In terms of the height comparisons, we can certainly pull together additional comparisons, following this evening, just to make sure that everyone sort of understands the difference between them. My recollection, the reserve at Tinner Hill at least, is that it's approximately 3 stories taller. It reads as 3 stories taller than what Tinner Hill is. They have very, very tall floors. I don't know if you want to speak to the floor-to-floor ceiling heights and stuff like that, too.
Yeah, specifically in the loading dock?
No, for the building overall.
Oh, okay. So first floor, and I haven't committed the numbers to memory. If I need them, I'll refer to my colleague Andy Caldwell. But the first floor retail is a much more generous floor height. It's something in the neighborhood of 16 feet, something like that, to accommodate the retail tenants. As we go vertically in the building, the floor heights get much thinner. And I think we're on the average of about 10.5 feet per floor on the upper levels of the building.
Top of slab to top slab or
Top to
slab to
top.
slab underside?
Yep, floor to floor.
Clear.
Top to top.
Top to top. Okay.
And then, we have tried to create, as you mentioned, building step backs. Now, they may not be going as far as you may want them to go. We'll continue to look at that on a going forward basis. But this is going to be a taller building. This area between South Washington Street and South Maple Street is planned to have the tallest buildings and the highest heights. And it is supposed to be taller than what's across the street at South Maple Avenue. I'll also say, too, that when you're at Pearson Square, in front of the Happy Tart or wherever you're at, it goes straight up for 6 stories plus the mechanical penthouse, just straight on up. And what we've tried to do, at least, I mean, that's where we kind of, we went further, we went up and then back, so that hopefully the recessed floors at 8, 9, and 10, it kind of reads more as a 7-story building. I think your point, though, on the other side of the stairwell is well taken, so I think we should probably take a look at that as well. I don't know if, yeah.
Quickly share a point on that.
Oh, yeah, please.
The reason that decision was made is because on the west side of the stair tower that you see in the rendered view that's happened to still be on the screen, there's already a setback on the 10th floor associated with that level of the building. And the massing of the facade felt like it was working fairly well from a facade perspective to make it less important. So we wanted to make the impact where we felt where we aren't already making an impact.
Doesn't that step back on the west side show up in your project view book? It seemed to
does.
me like that shows
There's a rooftop terrace
Yeah.
that exists on that side of the building.
Right.
Exactly. Yep.
That's at floor 10, though.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Kelly from KLNB, are you available by any chance on the phone?
Hello, yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
I can address the
yeah, please.
concern regarding the retail kind of further back in the plaza area. What we see for that retail in typical projects like this is those are destination uses, and specifically with Falls Church in general, the customers are local, they're loyal. So it's the boutique fitness that you're going to every week. It's the nail spa or the med spa that you're visiting, and it's your regular spot. And that's the type of uses we would target for those type of spaces. And that's what we've typically done in projects similar.
I don't know if that answers your question or concern about.
A little bit. A little bit. I think I'm concerned just about, what commitments there should be at a certain gateway, at site plan by site plan and then by permit. Just because I've seen a lot of retail go unfinished, just because once it's full, at full capacity and certificate of occupancy up above, there's that's the money generator. It's not the retail that's supposed to be activating the sidewalk.
And, you had brought up something too at the last meeting about trying to find a way to have those uses, be more community-serving uses in the event we can't lease those spaces. We have not had that conversation with staff, a little bit because I'm afraid to, because everyone always wants ground floor retail. But I think it's worthy of a conversation. We also received that in one of our boards and commissions comments that we did not have a chance to respond to for tonight. But I think it would be a voluntary concession that would allow those spaces. It would have to be probably with approval of the city manager after showing good faith efforts to try to lease the space and there's no market for it or whatever. But we could add a voluntary concession that does allow that to occur.
Thank you. That's
And
what I
I-
had.
We're there?
That's what I had for questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very good. Yeah.
I want to hear it all.
Okay, who would like to go next? Mr. Puentes?
My first comment is I found the board and commission's comments really helpful. There were a lot of them. So good job, staff, getting the boards and commissions to weigh in. Really good suggestions on a lot of those things. As far as the two motions, I think the project generally aligns with the comp plan. I did have to refamiliarize myself with the South Washington small area plan. It does seem a little bit dated, but I think it's generally consistent. I'm fine with the land use change. I do think this is a good spot for mixed use as opposed to purely commercial. As far as a special exception, it's a very positive fiscal impact. I'm generally fine with thinking it meets the criteria for the special exception. In the what I guess is the I further move section, I don't have a problem with the taller building necessarily. I do have, again, still some concerns with the massing on Maple. I understand the challenges with the loading dock. I think it really does suggest that the traffic on South Maple needs to be calmed. There were some really good suggestions from, I guess, CACT and some of the other groups about ways to address that, but it does seem pretty hostile right now for pedestrians. In fact, one of your slides on the street view kind of illustrated that. It was just showed a long stretch of asphalt without a lot of amenities for pedestrians there. So things like the width of the sidewalk, I know those things could come up. We can talk about those later, but I think those are things that we really should consider. I'm okay with you providing the parking that I think you need. I think it's a relatively low risk in this particular area, given the commercial uses. The impact on Virginia Village obviously is something I think that is concerning. I think we can address that in the site plan. And I know we have a process and the procedure with the city to address parking issues as they come up. But other than that, I think that the parking management plan is very interesting. I'm still not clear if the parking is unbundled from the units. There's one bullet that's in the parking management plan that says that's an option, but it seems like it's a bigger deal, especially when we talk about housing affordability. And I just would like to see more discussion about that. It's a big deal to unbundle that. A lot of places don't do it.
Not requiring it.
Also related to housing, it's still this whole issue between number of units or the voluntary concession with the cash. There was some disagreement between the Human Services Advisory Committee and the Housing Commission. It's challenging, I think, for somebody like me to figure out which which is better. I think I go with the cash, but it was interesting to see that there was some disagreement there. Some advice from staff would be helpful on that one. As far as the traffic impact study goes, I'm glad we have this now. I think it usually comes in later. I had some questions on the TDM plans. It says it's revised, but I literally put them side by side, couldn't tell a difference. So be interested to know what's different in the revised TDM plan, if there's anything different than just the parking management plan changes. And there was a helpful map there, showing that there's really no crosswalks now. I know that there were some conversations about that, but and I think that goes into one of the, further move sections that the staff laid out about considering reconfiguring some infrastructure in that area, roadway widths, bike lanes. I mean, there's a whole lot of things I think that need to be done in that section, especially on South Maple, especially if we can't do a lot to address, the reality of the loading dock there. But I have a couple other smaller things, but I'll leave that for you.
Okay. Either of you want to go next? Oh, I'm sorry, did you have?
No. So I don't know if you want to speak to the unbundling of the parking, but it's not our intent to force residents to have a parking space. We just wanted to have the right supply of parking in case 100% of the independent living units wanted to have a parking space, one per unit.
So, but you will provide the option for anybody to unbundle the parking should they?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then that's something you should address in the elsewhere in the application materials. Again, it's literally, I think, one bullet in the parking plan. It just seems like an odd place to have that.
In terms of traffic calming on South Maple Avenue and crosswalks, there is an existing crosswalk opposite the bowling alley right now. It is not ramped. We are relocating that, obviously, closer to Gibson. We're implementing the streetscape on our side as far as the bike lanes, striped bike lanes. We all know what that condition's like coming through there, but we have not had any, we did receive CAT comments, but we just looked at them yesterday, so we haven't had a chance to fully digest them, and we will going back to council, obviously, but we haven't heard any negative issues at all from staff, transportation staff, or anything about what it is that we're proposing, but we have to digest those comments and kind of get through them. The cash contribution, it was interesting. The cash contribution comments, we heard from members of the commission last time, we heard from housing commission members as well, which put it into a letter. The most poignant thing from that letter, which I thought I've never seen before, because every jurisdiction has been units, everything units, got to have units. And what was interesting was that the Housing Commission said that you kind of basically need an all-of-the-above strategy. We've been doing units for a while. We're going to be losing a significant number of units. The cash is good and can help with other things, either preserving units or helping in other ways. I've never seen a comment like that before, and I support it wholeheartedly. But that said, we've kept both options in the voluntary concessions, looking for recommendations from you all. Ultimately, it'll be up to council as to whether we keep both options in there or we just get rid of one of the options. But we're kind of agnostic on it, although we think that the money is better. But and Ariel, I don't know if you're available at all to address the commissioner's comment about the TDM plan and what has changed. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's just some minor updates. We had gotten just a few comments from staff to put in a little bit more details, most specifically about how the monitoring would work. For example, there is a request to include that we would notify staff when we plan on collecting counts. Also, another one was to add like a specific date when the annual TDM report would be submitted by. So it's just a few more details specifically on the monitoring and enforcement section of the TDM plan.
I'm not sure if that answers your questions.
Yep.
Okay.
It actually brings up one more thing just before I forget, and this may not be the point to address it here, but there's a suggestion for a TDM coordinator for this, which we've had in several different proposals and projects around town. Have they been doing that? Are they creating TDM coordinators at some of these other projects? And is there a way for us to know how effective those have been? Seems like the best job in the world, is TDM coordinator.
So most projects in the city, you're correct, that sort of a central element of a TDM plan is to actually have a person who's responsible for sort of doing it. And so that's the person who puts up the information kiosk, makes sure that the Metro cards are included in the entry packets for the new residents, make sure that the on-site parking stickers or whatever is required is being handed out. So yes, you have to have a person identified, and projects have that as part of their TDM. In some years, we've had the funding to have staff check in with those TDM coordinators. In some years, we haven't. It's something that we'd like to make a regular push, I think, especially following on the Community Energy Action Plan and this move to again, sort of a renewed interest. It's always been there, now it's renewed in sort of auto alternatives. I think that is something we want to make part of our regular staffing, to sort of check in with these folks, provide them help. But it is one of those things that shows up as a sort of a funding and a programming need.
Thank you.
Okay, who would like to go next? Commissioner, come on.
I can go. So I guess first I just want to say, like, I really appreciate the responsiveness of this new updated proposal to all of our comments. Often I feel we make comments and some of them are addressed and some of them are not, and I think you all really made a good faith effort to address many of the comments that you've received from us and from other boards and commissions, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. I liked this project the last time you came to us, and I still like it. You know, I think senior housing is something that we need to continue to build here in the city. This area of the city is intended to have some really tall buildings and some high heights, and I think this is maybe the catalyst. I think you all might have used that word the last time, but I think it is a good word, you know, for that kind of reimagining of what this section of South Washington should look like. I think we can expect the areas around that, around the building to continue to redevelop. I'm not sure what is in the cards for Virginia Village, what that will look like in 20 or 30 years. I would be surprised if it still looks the same as it does today. I do think it's important, though, you know, per some other comments from the other commissioners, to taper to the neighborhood. And I think, you know, the work that you've done to pull the building back at 75 feet is a good faith effort to do that. I think, you know, bringing that north corner back to narrow the facade that is facing Maple was also smart for those two reasons. And those are big changes that you're making. We don't always see big changes to projects. You know, we see kind of little changes. You've made a lot of little changes too, but you're also making some big changes that have an impact on the project. And so I appreciate the willingness to do that. I really like the iron spot brick for the commercial areas. I think that provides some nice definition of the pedestrian space, those first two stories. And there are a lot of creative touches, I think, that you all shared with us tonight that I really appreciate, particularly in the plaza. I know I asked you to look at sculptural shade structures last time, and now here we are with all these amazing ideas for sculptural shade structures, so thank you for that. I was thinking as you were presenting, you have them kind of clustered, and I was wondering if you could almost use them like breadcrumbs to bring people into the plaza, maybe even from both sides. I don't know, just an idea. I was curious about the surface that you're planning to use in the plaza. Is that AstroTurf for the green space?
You mean for the green open space?
Yeah.
No, regular sod.
It's sod. Ah, okay, interesting. We'll see how that goes. I know, I mean, when those are heavily used, I know that that can be hard to keep up, but I mean, I think that's the other thing that's important for all of us to remember is that we're getting a building that's going to have some senior housing, which we, I think, need as a community, and we're also getting like a brand new, amazing public park in the bargain, which is pretty cool, I think, in my opinion. And that public park is being enabled by us being willing to have a taller building in this area. So I think there are trade-offs on a lot of these things that we as commissioners have to consider when we're thinking about how the city should evolve and the needs of the community. Let's see. One little detail that I wanted to ask about, you mentioned the pedestrian access to the plaza from the garage. And is that visible here on this plan that you're showing?
Walking through. Let's see if I can find the floor plan. I think we actually had an arrow on this one. Yeah, so if you'll notice at the lobby area there, there's doors that show access from, pedestrian access in the garage into the lobby from the left, and then ultimately an arrow with a line that goes straight across the lobby to a set of doors that would then take you out to the park.
Do you have the pointer? Sorry.
We do.
I'm just not, I don't even know what part of the building we're
So
in.
these doors right here are access from the garage and then ultimately into the park this way. So you'd be
I
able to
see.
transgress the lobby right here.
So you go through the lobby?
And then out
Okay.
to the park. And this corresponds on the landscape plan with the hardscape path that's on this area as well. And it's separate from the potential resident entry here that would take you right to the towers, or the elevator core and go up. So it's a second option, if you will, to gain access to the lobby.
And is that the only egress from the garage through to the plaza? Is there I see it's in that back of the house area, in the corridor area, is there access from that area through? Or is it just through that one entrance?
It's largely contained to this area, and the reason for it, all of these retail spaces need access, routine access on a daily basis to the loading dock.
Got it.
Both to receive material coming in, take waste out, and this corridor that's in pink that you see here is the back of house service to all of these retail components. So we don't want to cross traffic of, clients ultimately coming to the retail through any of that back of house space, because it wouldn't necessarily be the right environment for them. So we're proposing that they use this lobby access to gain access to the park.
Okay. Do you have space for a pedestrian egress at the Maple Avenue garage entrance, or is that only auto? I'm just thinking that if you're parking sort of on that side, that you want to get to the Maple Avenue retail or the restaurant, then rather than walking all the way around the building, maybe.
We're currently not showing it in this plan, but it's something we can certainly look into.
Yeah, okay. I agree with Mr. Puentes's comments about anything that we can do to make South Maple more pedestrian friendly and especially more bike friendly. That's a really key connection for cyclists through into the center of the city and down to South Washington. And it also connects to Cavalier Trail Park, which we are planning on widening. So there's lots of good reasons to do as much as we can for bikes through that area. I think it's really commendable that you're looking at a shuttle. I'm really curious to hear what comes of that, and whether you're able to collaborate with some of the other buildings in the area on some sort of shuttle service. You are also on the WMATA 2A and maybe 3A. I don't know if 3A still exists anymore, but the 2A line that runs along South Washington Street. So there is, definitely service in that area. You're adding e-bike parking stations, which is terrific. To me, it's obvious that you all want to do this project really well, and you really care about this community, and you're really trying to do your best. So I just want to say that I appreciate that, and I see it. You've provided a lot of the other things that we asked for, the 50% EV conduit. We have green roof, we have native plantings, we have a lot of really great things in this project that we often ask for as commissioners that were either provided sort of out of the gate or are being provided now. So I'm sure that there are still things that we can do to improve the project. It does seem to get better and better, and I think the feedback that my fellow commissioners have given will help it be even better, but I'm excited about it personally. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hyra.
All right, it's getting late. We had one item, and we are going to go over time. Not two, sort of, and these are both items that we have, been reviewing quite often and frequently in consecutive meetings. But I I think this project has improved tremendously from, what was initially brought to us and where we are now. I know a lot of the commissioners have talked about the building and the built environment and the building's relationship to the other buildings that are nearby. I think they've commented on that very clearly and given you all some pretty good recommendations to keep going. You've already done some work on it, but I think probably some more needs to be done. But I'm not going to comment on the built environment. I'm going to comment more on the building's programming and the social environment. And also, of course, on affordable housing too, but that's easy. I'll start with the affordable housing. I know staff has made some recommendations, and you've gotten mixed recommendations from our staff. It seems that the project, the developer, and everyone working on this project doesn't really care which way it goes, whether there's some units or whether there's a cash in lieu. But this now is before us, the Planning Commission. We vote. We heard what staff said, we heard what the community said, and we have ideas and opinions. And we should now be giving our opinions to the applicant and to City Council. So why don't, it seems like we have, I think, a unanimous agreement that we should accept the cash in lieu in this instance. So can we agree that what we send to City Council strikes out the 2 units?
I'm happy to go along with that.
All right, well, we can get to that when the motion is made, but I would definitely recommend that. So that's it on the affordable housing side. All right, so the other thing is the biggest cash contribution is the affordable housing, and it also is the subsidy for the Tinner Hill Foundation. One, I want to know, where is the Tinner Hill Foundation going to get their space? And also, they're getting no rent for 10 years at a value of $2 million, which is more than the affordable housing contribution. So I noticed there was a letter of support from the Tinner Hill Foundation, which is tremendous. But we haven't heard, and I think many of us, the commissioners, want to know, how is the Tinner Hill Foundation going to plan out that space? I mean, they've done so much work on the history. They have the Jazz Fest. Like, there's so many things that they do, but they don't have a space. Now they have a space. Is this going to be a museum space, an art space, a history space? That would be really interesting to know, because that's going to activate this building. It also is going to connect this building to the Henderson House and the Tinner Hill Park, the Tinner Hill Homes, the Tinner Hill Building. There is so much important Black history that is a part of this corridor of our city. And what the Tinner Hill Foundation decides to do in the space will be really important to elevate that history, and also to let the new residents, the elderly people who come into this community, who many of them probably haven't ever lived here before, don't really know where they're moving. Well, now we can tell them about the important Black history, but that's important to know what the Tinner Hill Foundation is going to do in this space, and they're getting a $2 million subsidy. I mean, Jesus, that's a huge one, right? We know Creative Cauldron got their space, but we already know what they do, and they're just going to replicate what they do from one space into another. But I also think, related to the building height, the building height on one part where we haven't talked about is where I think it's highest, is going to be right across the street from the Henderson House. So we kind of want to know, what is the viewpoint from the Henderson House? We didn't see that perspective. We just got Maple and the low rises. But again, how are we going to connect what this building has to offer, all the vitality, the park space, the Tinner Hill Foundation space, to the rest of the parcels along this corridor? And I think that that's really important, because this will give this area an identity. It already has an identity, but we don't want this building to take away from that identity. We want it to add to that identity. And we haven't heard anything about the programming. The other thing about programming is going to be what restaurants come in, who they cater to. Do they cater to the people who live in the building or to other people in our community throughout the region? And when we think about that park space that's going to be there, what an asset, right? But also potentially could be a liability. We have park space around this area, and there are homeless people who live there. We have to be honest about that. We have the Dunkin' Donuts and the 7-Eleven. The cops are always there because there are people who are drug addicted who are right there. So how is this park space going to be monitored in a way that makes it very successful? Because if it's not monitored in a particular way, there is an element that is down there already that we as a city don't even know what to do with. We really don't. So we have to think about that. It's not just the building, it is the building and the people who are going to be in that building, the history in this area, and that all has to be thought through much greater than it has been thought through by anybody in the city right now and the applicant, quite frankly. Or at least maybe you've thought about it, but you haven't really presented it. You've really done a great job of presenting the aesthetics of the building and all the logistics and a lot of the things that, you know, are really, really important. But I think there's other aspects that are just as important to make this thing be successful. So my recommendation is that I'm not saying give more voluntary contributions, but maybe rethink some of these voluntary contributions. The art murals, I mean, maybe they cater and speak to the Black history of our community and what is right there and some of the people. So maybe we want to have that be part of the mix. The programming of the park, maybe we want to make sure that there are resources dedicated to this park space over time, because it's one thing to develop a building, there's another thing to manage a building. And our job is to kind of get you to do the best project, but we also want the best project that will be successful over time. So maybe resources need to be dedicated up front over time to make that park space successful. Also, you know, Tinner Hill Foundation getting $2 million subsidy, that's great, but then again, what's going to be programmed there? Maybe there needs to be additional resources from the city through other, you know, financing and other coffers and other grants that go to the Tinner Hill Foundation to really make that space pop. And also that the other restaurants that come in understand what the ethos and the vibe of the area is. And that something doesn't come in that just doesn't really match and make sense. So, again, I'll probably stop. I don't think I have any other comments. But I just hope that I've given some ideas to think about how to program this space from a social aspect and not so much from the built environment aspect. Thank you.
If I could just respond.
Sure.
Sorry.
Thanks, first of all, for your comments. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, I mean, the comments that you are raising are pretty remarkable. I agree. Right now, we have the Arts and Humanities Council sort of reviewing public artwork. That's the way the voluntary concession is written. I think we can write something else in there as well about having Tinner Hill Heritage Foundation, or we could actually spell out at a minimum what needs to be provided in the voluntary concessions. We'll give some thought to that. The ethos of what this area wants to be. I think one of the things that I hope, Kelly Atkinson, if you're there, but one of the reasons that we went with them is because they are very good at curating spaces and catering to, trying to generate a type of environment that people want to be in that responds to the surrounding community. To be honest, I don't think we've given it that much thought as far as what restaurants or what retail is going to be there. That will be developed. And I think as we develop our retail target marketing plan, that needs to be included in there, and it will be attached to the voluntary concessions. And then the public safety aspect of it too, that needs to be looked at. So I pledge that we will have a follow-up discussion coming out of Planning Commission on that issue as well. So very good comments, and I appreciate it. You give us something to think about.
Okay, I guess it's left to me to share my comments. I'll try not to retread on my colleagues' excellent comments. There were a lot of good thought-provoking issues there. I also wanted to acknowledge the excellent comments from the various boards and commissions. I think this was probably the best set of comments that we've gotten, at least in my time on the Planning Commission. Let's see. Let me start with staff. There's a couple things that I wanted to share with Ms. Arsenault. There was a comment from the CACT that recommended that we figure out a way to accomplish 10-foot width on Maple Avenue. It seems to me this is in line with what a lot of the notable thinkers are in the area of urban design. Jeff Speck is certainly well known to recommend that. So if there's a way that we can do that, I think it would help with traffic calming, which is important in my experience in both on bike and in a car on Maple Avenue, is that cars tend to go faster than the speed limit. So I think definitely could benefit from consideration there, and it would hopefully, as Commissioner Comont mentioned, help with the biking infrastructure along here. This is a key link to making a bike loop around the city. So I think it would be helpful if staff really gives some careful thought what could be done on this corridor, having this opportunity as this property redevelops. Also, with respect to the LEED Gold certification, is the escrow going to be calculated based on a per square foot? It is, okay. It'd be good to see that spelled out. I think that's a good way to ensure that we get the LEED Gold certification. I'm sure the applicant fully intends to do that, but the escrow would help on that. Same with respect to the 20% energy efficiency improvement below the ASHRAE baseline. I think if we can tie that into that escrow the same way, I think that would make us all feel a little bit more confident that the environmental aspects of this, the certification, will be achieved. I've had discussions with several residents on the issue of the height, and I think when I started out looking at this project, it was taller than I kind of would hope that it would, and I've given this as careful thought as I can. I think one of the points that was in the Village Society's memo kind of made sense to me, and that is with the large amount of open space that we have with this project, it is resulting in a 10-story building. And if we ask ourselves, well, would we rather have a lot less park space to get, let's say, a 9 or an 8-story building, I'm not sure that many of us would feel that that's a good trade-off. So that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable with the height. Also, I think when we consider the significant number of benefits that are proposed on this project, it's really kind of head spinning in a way. I mean, just a few that caught my attention. First of all, there's the community need for senior care, and I think this will allow more of our residents to consider staying in the city as they age. I think that's a big benefit. Significant fiscal benefit. I think we're looking at in the vicinity of $800,000 a year. That's very significant for a city of our size. I mentioned lots of open space with lots of amenities for the public to use, more than any project I think I've ever seen. $1.9 million for the ADUs. Commissioner Hyra spoke about that, and I would fully support an amendment that indicates our recommendation to City Council that they accept the cash in lieu. Universal design elements, I think it's excellent that you're kind of leading the way, and that should be a common thing that we require of all developers going forward. Conference facilities available to city boards and commissions and other entities at no charge. I think that the word on that, well, we'll get around quick. I don't think we're going to have to worry about needing too much by way of advertising. Because right now, you try to get a building at the library, but on the weekend it closes early, so that's a concern. There are contributions to the library, to the parks, public art. We talked about the Tinner Hill with the 10 years no rent, as well as the build-out. That's incredible. So a lot of these, to me, kind of, you don't just say, sure, bring in a 10-story building. The bar has to be raised pretty high, and I feel like what we're getting on the voluntary concessions certainly eases, for me at least, the issues of inconvenience that might be caused for some on the height of the building. I also think about, I used to live on North Oak Street, and there's a building right there on Broad Street. It's 803 Broad. I think it's at least 9 stories, and that building has been there for probably 4 or 5 decades now, and I think it's just kind of blended in to the background. I know I never really gave it much thought as being a problem. And I'm not saying that this necessarily would happen here, but a lot of times, when a building first goes in, it's going to have a big impact, but then it just becomes, part of the landscape. So all of that, I think, is just my way of saying that I think I can live with the height, which for me was the biggest issue. I think that may cover all of the issues. Like I say, I don't want to retread. There were a lot of things that I had on my list here, but my colleagues raised those, so I'm basically comfortable with that. So unless there's any other comments from staff or from the developer, I think we can consider going to our resolution, if somebody would like to lead off with that.
Actually, could I?
Oh, yeah, please.
I wanted to circle back because I just had questions.
Please do.
first.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm so sorry.
why
No,
we're
but
here.
I do want to, I do appreciate all of the positives, and it is, there are a lot of really great things that this community can get from this project. I really am, struggling very much and conflicted about the massive size along South Maple. When at 80 feet, a 10-foot step back is not tapering down to even the by right maximum that is across the street. And yes, I do understand that there's a lot of open space, and it is fantastic. It's in shade most of the time, which is good in the summertime, not so great in the wintertime. And the massive extent of that shade, how it goes all the way past the end of Gibson, is that anything on that side of the street is going to be in shade, and so I know that there's the negative impact of that is always going to happen, no matter what, with any size building over 6 stories. But I think we could do better to mitigate that. The other sticking point to me is that loading dock. That really does. It really does. The smells associated with that, the noise of dragging that dumpster out, even if it's a few times a week, that really impacts negatively the residential use on the other side of that street, as well as the pedestrian experience at that location. And I would strongly urge that get put inboard. The community at Winter Hill was very strong about and forceful about getting that loading dock inside Harris Teeter, and it did take many, many sessions. But I think this neighborhood is not as activated as Winter Hill is, and I think it's really important to respect the fact that there are people living there that I challenge anybody to say that they would want to open their front door and be looking at a loading dock and smelling that at any time of day, regardless if the door is open or closed. I respect the fact that you wanted to pull it inboard. I just think 2 feet inside a setback is not enough to mitigate the negative impact on the environment there. That's all I wanted to add to that. So I do have a couple of things that I wanted to add to the other provisions. Something about the loading dock studies needing to be done prior to special exception, providing sketches or vignettes of several types of uses in that open space to kind of see how that works with universal design and how people can use it of all ages and comfortably. I think that would be helpful as well. And an increased setback, as well as lowering that step back to the 6th floor, just to kind of help taper that back, and even exploring how that would taper. And we talked about the marketing plan as well. But I still have deep reservations.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
In the spirit of just asking for things to consider, I see I forgot one thing here before we get to our resolution. You have committed to using all electric appliances for the building, and I think that's great. Kind of prompted by some comments from the ESC, just a suggestion that you look at heat pump technology versus the resistance heat technology. That would apply to things like for water heaters and HVAC and clothes dryer, and then cooktops rather than a resistance element there to take a look at induction cooktops because those have progressed so far. So just something I wanted to share for you to consider. And with that, if we are ready, if someone would like to propose a motion.
I'm happy to do it.
you.
I'd like to reflect Commissioner Freelander's comments too. I think that's probably in the special exception, right? Some of your concerns you just raised. Maybe we could do them in pieces, do the first, the comp plan amendment and then the special exception. Is that right? Mr. Chair?
Depends where she comes out. Would that
If your
help?
question is procedural, I would suggest sort of two votes, sort of put the first motion on the table, take a vote, and then second motion on the second item.
Yeah.
Okay. So whereas Quinn Enterprises LLC, the applicant submitted an application for a comprehensive plan future land use map amendment to change the designation of the subject property from business to mixed use pursuant to the procedures set forth in section 17.06 of the city charter. And whereas at its regular meeting on August 8th, 2023, the council formally referred the special exception to the Planning Commission for its review and recommendation. And whereas the request for the comprehensive plan future land use map amendment for 360 South Washington Street is accompanied by a request to be considered in a separate action for special exceptions to permit residential use and height bonus for a mixed-use development on the subject property and the adjacent properties, 350 South Washington Street and 303 South Maple Avenue, real property code number 55-306-028 and number 55-306-026. And whereas the application to amend the comprehensive plan meets two of the three criteria as established by the Planning Commission rules of procedure for comprehensive plan amendments, specifically that significant change has occurred in the area of the subject site since the adoption of the comprehensive plan, and the adopted plan contains provisions which unreasonably limit the ability of the city to achieve the objectives of the plan. And whereas since the comprehensive plan future land use map for the subject parcels was last reviewed in 2005, the office, retail, and residential market has changed substantially, and mixed-use developments with a residential component have been constructed within the South Washington Small Area Plan area and have changed the land use in the vicinity, whereas the South Washington Small Area Plan adopted in 2013 has further refined the concept for the area and is incorporated by reference in the city's comprehensive plan and depicts the subject site on the concept map as an area for redevelopment potential and includes part of the site in the core commercial area, CCA, which encourages new development of higher density and intensity. And whereas the Planning Commission finds that the proposed project as amended by the applicant's revised materials is generally consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and South Washington Street Small Area Plan, and substantially achieves the goals of the comprehensive plan by providing a high-density mixture of commercial uses, senior living residential uses, retail and parcel consolidation, and pedestrian-oriented design. Now therefore, I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of TR 23-23 to City Council.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any comments? Okay. Mr. Trainer, would you?
Yep. Ms. Friedlander?
Yes.
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Comont?
Yes.
Mr. Hyra?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, that leaves the remaining item on the special exception.
I can make that motion.
Please.
Whereas Quinn Enterprises LLC, the applicant, submitted an application for a special exception to allow residential uses within a mixed-use development project and a special exception for a height bonus pursuant to Section 48-488-2 in conformance with the procedures set forth in Section 48-90 of the City Code. And whereas the application proposes a development comprising a total building floor area of approximately 282,506 gross square feet on approximately 1.866 acres of land, and an increase in building height by up to 40 feet to 10 stories or maximum of 115 feet, instead of the B2 Business District 75-foot height maximum. Whereas the proposed mixed-use development includes a maximum of 233 senior living human care units, 32,621 square feet of office space, 14,949 square feet of retail space, 4,846 square feet of office space, including dedicated civic space. Whereas in order to achieve the development as proposed, the application requests a special exception for a height bonus and to allow residential uses within a mixed-use development project in a business district, as shown in the special exception applications, including the conceptual development plan dated June 9th, 2023, and revised on October 4th, 2023. And whereas the applications for the special exceptions and associated comprehensive plan map changes were referred to various citizen boards and commissions for public review and comment, and whereas city boards and commissions reviewed the comprehensive plan future land use map amendment at public meetings and provided advisory comments, and whereas at its regular meeting on August 8th, 2023, the council formally referred the special exception to the Planning Commission for its review and recommendation, and whereas the Planning Commission finds that the proposed project, as amended by the applicant's revised materials, is generally consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and South Washington Street small area plan, and substantially achieves the goals of the comprehensive plan by providing a mixture of commercial uses, residential uses, retail and parcel consolidation, and pedestrian-oriented design. Now, therefore, I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of TR 23-24 to City Council. I further move that the applicant continue to revise the project proposal to address the following. 1. Work with staff to ensure proposed project wastewater has adequate treatment capacity. 2. Revise building ground floor commercial layout, orientation, and programming to activate South Maple Avenue frontage and ensure that the space is designed for flexibility of different uses. 3. Revise shadow studies to show the full extent of shadows in all impacted buildings and, if appropriate, adjust building massing and scale to lessen impact on nearby properties. 4 has been done. 4, provide nearby pedestrian and bicycle connections, including marked crosswalks, to fully connect the project site to the pedestrian and bicyclist networks. 5, during the site plan process, further refine the TDM plan and parking management plan to ensure adequate parking supply.
I think the numbering might have gotten.
Well, I skipped 4.
4's already done.
4 is done, so I'm marking it off. Further refine the TDM plan and parking management plan to ensure adequate parking supply to support successful commercial spaces and provide adequate on-site parking for care providers, both employees and third-party providers. 6, during the site plan process, provide shade, for example, art, umbrellas, trees, etc., in the plaza areas to make them comfortable and usable during all seasons. And 7, during the site plan process, provide details on passenger drop-off at the main entrance and designated spaces for rideshare.
Okay, do we have a second? Any other comments?
Well, just, I propose, I guess, an amendment to the resolution that we strike out the 2-unit option for the affordable housing, and that the only thing that goes forward is the cash in lieu contribution. So I think we can just go to the document wherever that says, or 2 units, we just delete it.
I think we have to put it in the motion. Is that correct? Yeah, so the wording would be that Planning Commission recommends.
Yeah, the voluntary
The
concession
council.
document has to be drafted by the applicant. It's a document they offer to us. But you're right, Commissioner Comont, Commissioner Hyra, you can include it in your motion. You could either make it worded as a recommendation to the, I guess it's a recommendation to council, so you would sort of urge that the council work with the applicant to.
We don't need to do it. I mean, we have 2 city council members here, and they know the way this commission feels, and putting it in the document or not,
I think it's fine to add it in the, I think we all support adding that recommendation to the motion, so it's just
it's up to you guys. If you want to do it, do
maybe
it.
the new number 4.
But I just want to just put this forward to you, that often we make a recommendation and we give these options, we do have the power to just change the document. You know, we don't have to say we recommend. We can take the document and amend it. So just, that's in our purview to do that. I know it's the norm of this commission to just take what the staff and the council gives to us and review it and then say, oh, we recommend this or that, but we could actually make formal changes to the documents. So just know that that's our job, but we don't do that often. But it's a norm. It's not the way we have to do our business, so.
Okay, noted.
So, did you have a suggestion for adding, or do you not want to add a? I would like to note that for the record, that the planning commission recommends council
Accept cash in lieu
accept cash in lieu. rather-
versus the units.
Versus units,
Yep.
sure.
Is that,
So I have as a new number 4, perhaps?
Well, hold on a second. Before we lose the bubble on this one, let's get that one typed up and clarify that it's actually accepted into the motion.
Right, I don't have any language down yet.
Sorry.
Can I suggest
Please.
that city council accept the cash in lieu option for affordable housing rather than the units?
you could even put in, we urge city council to make it a little stronger.
Just in terms of the structure of this, this is recommendations back to the applicant, so I think you could be clear that sort of your recommendation is that, the applicant remove the option for, that the applicant, for the ADU contribution, provide only the cash in lieu option.
Okay, that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Sorry, the ADU option only.
For the ADU option, the applicant provide only the cash in lieu option.
So for the ADU option.
Yeah.
Sorry, is,
Right at the beginning where you've got the ADU, I think you could put for the ADU option.
That, for the ADU option, that the applicant provide only the cash in lieu option. Sure.
so for the ADU option, that the applicant provides only the cash in lieu option.
Or just only cash in lieu. Sure.
Only cash in lieu.
So Commissioners Comont and Mr. Prentice, was it you that
Yes.
seconded it? So you'd have to accept your,
Accepted.
okay.
Okay, any other?
I have a couple. So actually, the first one that I'm looking at, the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 5 kind of need to be addressed before council approves the special exception, I would think. So can we put something in the beginning that states that? I don't know where that would be, if it would be up, I further move that the applicant continue to revise the project proposal to address the following, including items 1 through 3 and 5 be addressed before council approves the special exception, or does that become a number 1? I don't know how that works.
Do these all have to be
Or do I have- or
resolved
do you have to do
before council makes their final determination, or?
Staff had drafted it. The last 3 are certainly something you want commitments to as part of the special exception, but typically they'd be refined during the site plan. But I think if you wanted sort of up there, I think you could have a sort of a comma with items, was it 1 through 5, addressed prior to approval of the special exception?
Right, but we changed number 4, so
I
number
think,
4 is-
well, that's VC language, so it would still have to be,
Okay,
I think you want to strengthen it by leaving it there in that timing.
okay.
Special exception approval.
Adoption or approval?
I can live with that.
Is that okay?
Is that okay?
Yeah? Is everybody else okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I got more.
Okay,
I figured we would do them one at a time.
jump in.
So I acknowledge that my colleagues are I'm in the minority in terms of the height. So I would like to get some language, and I don't know how everybody feels about adding an amendment to increase the setback to 20 feet at South Maple curb and a 15-foot step back at the 6th floor to show how those facades will taper better to transition to the R district across the street. I don't know, that's kind of wordy.
What do you think?
I'd be in support of doing something maybe more general about exploring options to further taper the building on South Maple, but I don't know how I feel about specific recommendations. What are your thoughts?
I don't know what it would do to the enhancement of the building.
I don't either, but I kind of like your thought about continuing work to, look at the shadow studies or whatever it is that we deal with the height issue to mitigate any negative effects.
And that number 3 says, if appropriate, adjust building massing and scale to lessen impact on nearby properties. So that is included with the shadow studies, that expectation.
I'd say adjust, I just don't feel like it's strong enough to really,
What?
I just don't feel like it's strong
Yeah,
enough.
why don't you just give the location? I mean, you really, right, most of your recommendations are about South Maple, so and also if you want, if you want the 20-foot setback, I mean, again, it's just a recommendation. So if you want to put something very specific, put it in, but it's just a recommendation that council's going to do whatever they want with. And so it's up to you.
I would say increase the setback to 20 feet from South Maple curb. And further evaluate step backs at lower levels to show how the facades will taper and to better transition to the R district along Maple Avenue, South Maple.
Did he get the further explore part? And further explore, step back, is that what you had?
Yeah.
So before
Further
step back,
explore, step back at lower level. I'd really like to have it say 6th floor. I would say step back at 6th floor.
and then you can
And get rid of
delete.
lower level. And further explore tapering of the structure to better transition to the R district along South Maple.
So just a clarifying question for the applicant. We're at 18 feet setback, is that correct, on South Maple?
Yeah, 18 feet at its narrowest point, and then it widens out from there.
And that 18 feet is for how much of South Maple? Like half the building, I think you said earlier, is that correct?
So 57% is more than 18.
Okay, so 57% is greater than 18 feet in width. And at its widest, it's about 30 feet.
So there's a pinch point that's 18, but
Okay.
a lot of it is,
It's like
I just-
like the Tinner Hill building.
I know, maybe those 2 feet don't matter. I don't know how complicated it is to move a building, so,
Okay, then I can take out I'll take out the setback. I understood it to be 18 feet the whole way. I didn't realize that it opened up, so.
Mr. Chairman, if I may recognize the architect real quick.
Sure.
Just a point of order, the requirement of the fire marshal is that we have the setback between 15 to 30 feet. The 18 feet on the one side is the result essentially of maintaining the 30 feet on the other side. So if we increase to 20 feet, we'll be in violation of the fire code.
Gotcha. Understood.
Okay, so.
I can adjust that.
So increase the,
I would say, just say, get rid of increase the setback, get rid of that first part of the sentence and just start the sentence at step back at the sixth step.
Well, before you get too detailed, what's your reaction to that? Can you accept that?
yeah, I can accept, I think I shared your, interest in what more they can do to taper for that side of the neighborhood, yes.
And
So-
Commissioner Pontes?
I'm okay with everything after, from further explore, but I'm just uncomfortable with the specifics of it.
The sixth floor
Yeah.
specifics.
I guess I'm confident that council will take our recommendation and view it holistically.
You can say further explore tapering. I don't, I don't
Well,
want to.
you should hold your ground.
No, it's fine.
You can delete it.
I'm okay with this. I'm okay with the sixth floor recommendation. I don't know how to word it, but you wouldn't support a sixth floor recommendation? You don't? Okay. Okay, so if we can say further explore tapering of the structure to better transition to the R district along South Maple, that sounds like language that both of the motion makers would accept.
That's fine.
Okay.
I can live with that if that was, if that's a deal breaker that it doesn't get in.
Do you have another one?
I do.
Okay.
Further develop the loading dock size logistics to incur inside the garage to mitigate negative impacts on the residential district.
I support that.
Okay, all right.
And I think we already talked about it. Submit a marketing plan with proposed programming prior to special exception approval.
Could we-
with the,
Okay. I lost you the last one after.
Sorry.
Further develop the loading dock size.
and logistics to occur inside the garage to mitigate negative impacts to the residential district.
Thank you.
And then the marketing plan, submit a marketing plan with proposed programming prior to SE approval. And percentage commitment prior to permit. Don't know if we can do that. And allow for flexibility in the retail description to allow for intergenerational programming for these spaces.
It says as to approval. You mean prior to approval?
Prior to the approval, yeah. Proposed programming,
Take out the as, yeah.
change that to prior to the approval. And a certain percentage, I don't have a percentage, commitment prior to permit. And allow flexibility in retail description to allow for intergenerational programming for these spaces. I don't have a better way to say that.
You want, here, now I'm at the, yeah, a retail, like submit a retail marketing plan, right? Or a commercial marketing plan?
Yeah, retail.
Yeah.
So submit a retail.
Yes, retail marketing plan. No, don't take, there you go.
To the approval.
I don't understand the full, the.
You need a
the-
verb
The
there?
prior tos. Can you,
And make a percentage commitment or establish a percentage commitment?
Yes, and establish, okay, so submit a retail marketing plan with the proposed programming prior to SE approval.
Take out to the,
To, and then say, get rid of to the approval. And committed, and what did you say? You said a certain percentage?
Establish.
Establish a percentage commitment.
To what?
to
What-
permit and allow flexibility.
A percentage commitment of, it's really for the,
Is that percentage commitment of COs?
of retail establishments, right, who are wanting, who are going to commit to being in that space prior to permit.
You
So
mean sort of
are you,
of
are you
the-
just trying to prevent like Founders
empty.
One, basically?
Founders
So-
one
We will, we
and
will
Timber
have
Hill.
warm lit shells, so they will be, it won't be boarded up, right?
I want to make sure that it actually gets attended to in getting a tenant, in securing tenancy in there.
Let me
Yeah.
just interject. Based on our rules of operation, we turn into a pumpkin at 10:30, so if we can finish this quickly, we could go ahead, otherwise we need to
Well, we
take a
have
vote.
the planning director's report anyway.
No, no,
so-
I realize we have more to do, but
Oh.
do we want to make that vote right now? Maybe we should.
Yeah, I move that we go to 11 PM.
11
Second.
PM, okay, second from Commissioner Friedlander. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we're good till 11.
My apologies, everyone. Okay, establish establish a percentage of tenant commitment prior to permit.
Like tenant occupancy commitment?
Yeah. Tenant
Or
lease.
of leased space
Lease.
commitment?
Yeah, tenant lease or leased commitment. I'm not sure the appropriate term for that. I would rather see some leases committed to prior to permitting the
So
job.
can we just say a
so
percentage of committed leases?
Yeah.
Percentage of committed leases.
Yeah, it's just interesting. We did this with, we were very concerned with Founders Row 2. And we had all
Yeah.
verbiage like this, and the staff was all on, I mean, the staff jumped on this and said, we can't have Founders Row 2 be what Founders Row 1 was. But it does seem with this one, is this in here? I didn't read that.
There is,
So there is so in Founders Row 2, we had a commitment to levels of finish in the space. So there was a commitment to the HVAC systems being installed, the exterior facades being installed as part of the residential COs. There is a commitment in the VCs here in regards to sort of exterior construction as well as interior construction that's already provided in the offered VCs.
my concern is the empty retail
Yeah, I
space that never activates the sidewalk, which is
Understood.
what
We get it.
happens down at Tinner Hill.
So can we put a period there, or,
Committed leases, period. And then get rid of commitment to permit, and then just start the sentence with allow
Flexibility.
flexibility in retail description to allow for, that's too many allows. In the description,
to permit
permit-
intergenerational programming?
yeah,
Take out 4.
thank you. I think that,
Okay.
Is that acceptable to?
Yes. You?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
thank you, no.
All righty. Mr. Trainer, do your thing.
Just, if I could, just the way we structured the enumerated list, the top half of the list was for those things that had to be resolved at VC, and that the last 3 you've added are all of that nature.
No.
So it's up to you all, it's your motion, but I guess what I would suggest is, based on what you're talking about, sort of move those to the top of the list and
That sounds
expand
good.
your,
Yeah, please do. You don't have, do you have to do it now?
I can't make a motion, so someone else would need to sort of offer that amendment.
I would like to, or can we amend it to be 1 through 5 and then 9 through 11?
Sure?
I see. Okay, that's the reference you're talking
Which
about.
items 1 through 5 and 9 through 11 addressed prior to SE approval?
Okay, thank you.
That do it? Yep.
Accept.
Accept. Okay. Now I think we're ready.
Okay. Ms. Friedlander?
Reluctantly, no.
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Comat?
Yes.
Mr. Hyra?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, commissioners. Did we want to take a break or move right ahead?
Yeah, that's motor.
I'm taking a quick break. I'll listen.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to do minutes, so, you know.
Yes.
Before you all leave, thank you, staff, for your hard efforts on this, and thank you, applicant, for your hard efforts. We appreciate it. All right. Minutes. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt our minutes of September 20th?
So moved.
I'll second, assuming I can do that. All those in favor, say aye. Oh, I should, looks like Commissioner Comant, you're still. Do you want to take a second, or speed read through there? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Our minutes are adopted. So now, I think we turn to our director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I will recognize the time and move through this. So I wanted to highlight two things in my director's report. I'll also go through my usual agenda look ahead, but I'll start here. So first, I wanted to announce that the Economic Development Office had released what is a usual publication of the city's mixed-use report card. In years past, we've been able to do this on an every other year basis. We had a slight pause, but I'm glad we're back on track publishing these. There's a larger report that's attached, but I just want to call out some of the metrics, right? This is cataloging the performance, obviously fiscal performance is coming out of the Economic Development Office, but also the community performance of these things and what they're adding to the community and what they have added over time. So this is looking at 9 mixed-use buildings that were constructed in the city, and you can see the list there. But to summarize some of the key things in the chart. So gross tax revenues, that's all taxes, meals, professional services, property taxes. Gross tax receipts is approximately $12.2 million per year. When you net out the public service cost of those buildings, the net benefit to the community is $4.5 million per year from these projects. The total commercial square footage that's been delivered, largely on the ground floor of these buildings, sometimes on the upper stories, 2.5 million square feet. And I know there are concerns about retail viability and commercial viability. Of that 2.5 million square feet, 87.5% of it is leased or occupied, which is certainly a comfortable percentage, especially where sort of retail and office leasing are. Affordable housing homes that have been provided through these projects is 99 homes, and over the course of the projects, just under $9 million was provided in school capital contributions. And one thing I do want to note from a land use planning perspective, financial planning perspective, these 9 properties in total are just under 23 acres, which is a bit under 2% of the city's total land area. But those total gross receipts are 10.3% of all the city's revenues.
As I recall, I think this takes roughly somewhere between 10 and 15 cents off of our tax rate.
Yeah, the value of a penny has changed over time with the tax rate, but you're right on that number.
Right. So if anybody listening, if you take your current assessed value, and we're at $1.23, go up to $1.38, multiply that out, and you'll see the benefit of our 9 mixed-use projects.
So that's the first item. Second item, and this is to give you all a preview of what's coming your way, and and we had a public comment on this earlier. It was in the council's packet this Monday for a work session, and it's before council. It's scheduled to go to council next Monday for first reading before it comes to you. But these are what we're calling our 2023 zoning cleanups. We're trying to sort of preview that we want to get in the regular habit of reviewing and revising the city zoning ordinance. It is part of best practices to make sure that the zoning ordinance is kept up to date with what's in the state enabling legislation, as well as flagging any things that sort of come up in terms of inconsistencies or lack of clarity. We'd rather not solve those by a zoning determination. We'd rather solve those with better written code. It's on a short schedule because they are cleanup in nature, and I'll summarize what they are on the back of this page. But it is proposed council first reading next Monday. You all would have November to hold a work session and hold a public hearing and recommendation back to council so that council could vote before the close of the calendar year.
And I presume before it comes back to us, you could consider Mr. Gresko's comments for whatever value those would have.
Yeah, they were good comments. I just want to sort of touch on them as I summarize the tables proposed in this chart. But you can see they're largely clerical in nature. One is updating the advertising requirements to match state code. Second is matching the variance criteria to match state code. Third is disconnecting what today is. There's a linkage between some of the allowed OD uses and what's allowed in the T1 district. And so left as is, the T1 change that goes into effect January 1 would then also affect OD. And so what's proposed here is to break that link so that OD has no change to it. So the proposal is to keep OD as it is. Front yard set, there's an awkward syntax in one of the footnotes, and so we're just reversing, we're recommending to reverse the order of some sentences to clean that up, and then to remove reference to a definition, to a defined term that's no longer used. The comments from Mr. Gresko, those were in relation to the fourth attachment here, which I didn't copy and paste into the body of the memo, but is attached. He was referencing an item that actually isn't proposed for amendment with this round of cleanups. It has to do with non-conforming structures and second-story additions. Staff thinks it's worth cleanup, but not within sort of the time scale that's allotted here. We think we'd want to leave more time for public review and comment on that. So that's not included in this proposed list of updates. That's it for the written report. I'll just go briefly to the look ahead. Gosh, is there any way to zoom in? Oh, thank you. So you've got 2 meetings scheduled in November. November 1st is a Wednesday. We're returning to our speaker series with Hillary Orr, the Deputy Director of Transportation for Alexandria. Will be with us to talk about Alexandria's efforts toward Vision Zero, what their vision is and how they got there, and the efforts that they took internally to get moving in that direction. You'll also have your first work session on the Stratford Gardens proposal. This is the reuse of the Stratford Motel. So that'll be a work session item for you that night, as well as your fall work session to kick off the CIP. And this is really for you all to receive an update on how well staff is doing in implementing the CIP, and also to provide some direction to staff in drafting next year's CIP. So it really is the kickoff of your fall season prior to staff actually drafting the CIP. And then the zoning cleanups that I just referenced. Your second meeting in November, public hearing and recommendation back to council on those zoning cleanups. Review as a work session item of Fellows Property Park Master Plan. This is prior to them submitting a site plan. They want to get, the project team wants to get your all's views on the conceptual plan for the park. And then bike plan update and work session. That'll be kicking off its public engagement, so we'll share that with you. And then also kicking off end-of-year activities with our service survey. And then just looking ahead to the December meeting, that'll be it's proposed to be a joint work session with the Housing Commission, so that you all have an opportunity together to review the latest projections from the ongoing demographic study. And I will pause there. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Stoddard? Okay, well, thank you for that.
Late to the
report.
schedule, but where are we bringing in new planning commissioners? Do we have a?
I've asked that question, and I know the Appointments Committee has received applications, and they are conducting interviews for that vacancy.
So it's up to the council committee. Yeah. Commissioner?
I don't have a question for Paul, but do we give commissioner updates? Are we doing that or no? I didn't know, I went to the restroom, so I didn't know, because it was
Oh, you missed it.
before, well, it's on the agenda before.
I'm kidding. Yes, if you have an update, please share it, and we'll...
It's real quick. I got invited to go down to UVA a couple days ago, and I presented in a class on affordable housing with the chair of the Planning Commission for Charlottesville. And he talked about what they're doing on affordable housing. They have made a commitment of $10 million a year towards affordable housing. And I just said, how the heck did you do that? And he said, one, they got, and I have the plan, and I would like to share it with you. But remember, I don't know if you guys remember, but I tried to get us to move our affordable housing into the capital improvement plan. And Paul, you just mentioned that we're going to be doing planning with that. And when I was in Alexandria, affordable housing was in the capital improvement plan. And here the norm has been no, because it's not seen as economic development. It absolutely is part of economic development. And Charlottesville moved their affordable housing into the capital improvement plan. So they do long-term planning and float bonds and also do other financing mechanisms over the long haul to make sure that $10 million a year go out to do affordable housing. And I just think that, we often compare ourselves to Alexandria or Arlington, and, we always kind of say, well, what's possible within the state of Virginia? We're always worried that the state has some regulations and laws that we can't do things. There are tons of things that we can do, and we should be learning from a place like Charlottesville. Different city, but deals with very similar things that we do. And they're able to commit a lot towards affordable housing. They are also doing the same type to how we did with the T-zones. They've done a rezoning to try to get more housing built, but the housing that they're building is not $800,000 townhomes, which we're likely to get in our T-zones. So anyway, I know I'm going on and on, but basically the chair of the Planning Commission for Charlottesville said that he would be more than happy to try to come and be a guest speaker for us, because we have our speaker series, but he said he would absolutely do it over Zoom, so we can have him come in to explain, how they have changed and how they have now committed much more resources towards affordable housing.
Sounds like a great idea. I'd be happy to hear from them. Okay, any other commissioners' reports?
I have a quick note. So I recently completed my planning commissioner school down in VCU, and as much fun as that was, I did want to make note that both the instructors gave commendations to the City of Falls Church small area plans. They use them quite frequently and spoke very highly of all the work that you all are doing here. So I felt very proud, and I wanted to share that with everyone.
Mr. Stoddard is smiling.
Good stuff.
Yes.
Good job.
I don't do the work, but I'm happy to pass it along to the people who
Pass
do.
it
It's very good
along.
to hear. Thank you.
It's all linked. Any other commissioner reports? Is there anything else here that I've forgotten? Did we get through your entire director's report then, Paul?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other words of wisdom before we call it an evening? I think you all earned your pay this evening. I'm really impressed by all the comments that people made. So with that, let's call it quits till the next time.
Thank you.
Well, I knew it would be a long one.